The elderly woman delivers the shocking diagnosis to Fairy and her mother, confirming that the unmarried noblewoman is indeed pregnant. Gripping Fairy by the shoulders, her mother urgently demands to know if the child belongs to Muse, prompting a hesitant but affirmative confession. Fairy stands resolute in her conviction, thinking to herself that it is simply impossible for the baby to belong to anyone other than her fiancé. The scene opens showcasing the entangled fates of the noble families involved. Determined to take control of the situation, Fairy decides she must be the one to break the news to both her father and Muse personally. Stepping out onto the balcony under a starry sky, she approaches Muse, who is quietly gazing out at the night scenery. Muse notices her pale complexion and asks if something is wrong, inviting her to watch the meteor shower with him. Just as Fairy prepares to reveal her pregnancy, a sudden wave of nausea hits her, causing the world to spin uncontrollably. As she collapses to the floor, Fairy laments the terrible timing while the beautiful meteor shower triggers a dormant memory. Drifting into a flashback, she recalls how her engagement to Muse was arranged at age 10 purely to align their family's political interests. Her first impression of her young fiancé was terrible due to his cold attitude, though she couldn't deny that his face was incredibly pretty. The young Muse didn't even bother hiding his annoyance with her, leading a young Fairy to believe their marriage was doomed from the start. While Fairy attempted to draw animals to pass the time, Muse bluntly asked what she was doing, unable to distinguish her cat from a dog. The children bickered, with Fairy accusing him of being boring while Muse insisted he was having fun reading despite his sour expression. Fairy complained that sitting next to someone who glared and ignored her wasn't fun, acknowledging the mutual animosity between them. Muse countered by claiming he wasn't ignoring her, pointing out that her sharp eyes made her look mean even when she wasn't glaring. Blushing slightly, the young boy admitted he simply didn't know how to interact, awkwardly asking if she was just bad at socializing too. Their relationship began to shift on her birthday when Muse gifted her a sketch, proving to Fairy that he wasn't actually a bad person. Fairy beamed with joy at the amazing drawing, prompting a shy Muse to promise he would create another one for her the following year. Years later, about 2 months prior to the balcony collapse, the couple found themselves caught in a sudden downpour while horse riding. They sought shelter in a cabin to wait out the storm, where a soaked Fairy felt embarrassed sitting in her undergarments near him. In the intimacy of the moment, Muse pulled her close and confessed that he loved her with all his heart, sealing their feelings with a kiss. Back in the present, Fairy wakes up with the shocking realization that she has reincarnated into an otome game and is pregnant by a capture target. Unaware of her internal panic, Muse sits by her bedside and smiles warmly, murmuring about how cute she looks while sleeping. He gently pats her head and informs her that the Marquis told him the news, asking softly how she is feeling. Muse places a hand on the blankets, asking if she is carrying his child, and reassures her not to be afraid of the situation. Overwhelmed with joy, he begins rambling about marriage papers and raising the baby, forcing himself to calm down when he realizes he is getting carried away. He looks at her with genuine affection, visibly happy that she is carrying their child inside her. Fairy realizes that although the game has a designated heroine, she is currently the one being loved by Muse as the Villainess. The narrative reveals that the game's story officially begins the day after the meteor shower, when the commoner heroine transfers to the academy to meet the 5 knights. Muse fantasizes aloud about their future outings with the baby, causing Fairy to reflect that her absolute favorite character was also the hardest to woo in her past life. Watching him smile so sweetly, Fairy realizes she has never seen this side of him before, recalling that maxing out his affection unlocks the hidden devotion route. The doctor orders Fairy to rest for a week, but she panics knowing that the game's heroine arrives tomorrow and fears Muse will fall for her while she is stuck in bed. A quiet moment passes as the visual focus shifts, emphasizing the tension of the looming plot twist that Fairy feels helpless to prevent. Fairy calculates that her absence means the main characters won't meet for another week, while Muse decides to skip school and stay by her side just in case. As Fairy wonders if her pregnancy has fundamentally altered the game's code, Muse internally plots to rush the legal marriage so they can immediately begin living together as husband and wife. The very next day, Muse's parents arrive to apologize for their son's actions, and the political fallout is swiftly sorted out between the noble families. Deciding to embrace her new reality with her favorite character, Fairy agrees to move into House Lamest, much to Muse's visible excitement. A week passes like a dream, and Fairy returns to the school grounds, unable to believe this is her new life. Muse suddenly scoops her up into a bridal carry on the stairs, claiming it is dangerous to walk, leaving Fairy blushing and confused by this stranger's personality. He remains glued to her side throughout the morning and even sits next to her in class, his overprotective behavior drawing a sigh of relief from Fairy that he is still focused on her. When a classmate mentions that the transfer student is the adopted daughter of Viscount Negan, Muse dismissively replies that he doesn't recognize the name at all. Fairy spots the girl and instantly recognizes the game's heroine, noting with suspicion that she is staring at them intently. Attempting to escape the awkward situation, Fairy excuses herself to step out, but Muse immediately calls out to stop her. The heroine, Villainess, intercepts her in the hallway and asks for a moment, prompting Fairy to decide her best strategy is to play dumb. Villainess introduces herself with overwhelming energy, but before Fairy can process the encounter, Muse steps in and demands to know what she is doing. Muse coldly positions himself between them, asking what business this stranger has with his wife. Villainess freezes in shock, stuttering in disbelief as she processes the word wife coming from the capture target. The classroom erupts into chaos as the students scream, unable to comprehend that the famous Ice Prince is already married. Muse silences the room with a sharp glare, warning everyone that he won't let anyone near her because his wife is in a delicate condition. He guides a stunned Fairy away, whispering that only his beloved wife is allowed to call him by his name. Fairy suspects Villainess is also a reincarnator based on her reaction, but Muse cuts her thoughts short by insisting they go home immediately despite the exams. On the carriage ride, Fairy asks if it is okay to reveal their marriage, to which Muse replies that he doesn't mind if it successfully scares off pests. He smiles gently and informs her that starting today, they will officially be living together. As they arrive at the mansion, Muse confesses that his heart nearly exploded from the tension earlier, while Fairy looks at the grand building in awe. Lady Senna greets her at the door with a beaming smile, welcoming Fairy to her new home and promising to take care of her. Muse begs his mother to tone it down, but she ignores him to enthusiastically show Fairy the feast she prepared and guide her to her room. Sitting down to dinner, Fairy thanks the ladies and marvels at how different the Ice Prince's mother is compared to her cold social reputation. Lady Senna insists on being called mom or mother-in-law, while serving light dishes specifically designed for Fairy's condition. Fairy is stunned into silence by the kindness, causing a worried Muse to panic and ask if she hates the food. Muse's father teases the flustered couple, chuckling as he suggests they start calling him father-in-law or even Gramps immediately. Trying to move past the embarrassment, Fairy asks about changing clothes, only for Muse to boldly ask if they will be sharing the same room. Muse nonchalantly suggests she change right there, but upon seeing her flush with embarrassment, he relents and offers the room next door. Fairy gazes at her fiancé, overwhelmed by his dreamy appearance and thinking he looks more adorable now than any CG she ever unlocked in the game. Leaning in close, Muse whispers for her to save her voice for him alone, causing Fairy to wonder if she has stumbled into the hidden devotion route. Determined to keep his affection, Fairy resolves to stay by his side and do her best to make him love her even more. The next morning, Muse wakes up beside her with a gentle smile, telling Fairy he feels truly blessed to see her face first thing. He pulls her into a cuddle, asking her to stop being so formal and to finally start calling him just Muse. Their morning intimacy deepens as they share a tender kiss, with Muse playfully urging her to say his name. Later in the school garden, Fairy eats a snack and reflects on the intense day, still baffled as to why Muse loves her so much. Villainess approaches her while she is alone, confirming she waited for Muse to leave before asking for a private word. The heroine immediately drops her facade, demanding to know how the Villainess is already married to her target. Fairy decides her only option is to play dumb, which only infuriates Villainess, who snaps at her to stop pretending. Villainess accuses Fairy of being a reincarnator who used her knowledge of true lover to steal Muse first, and Fairy internally admits she is right. When Villainess claims Muse belongs to her, Fairy is baffled by her logic, thinking he has been hers since the beginning. Declaring that this world belongs to her as the heroine, Villainess arrogantly orders Fairy to divorce him and go repent somewhere else. Fairy refuses to understand her twisted logic, prompting Villainess to scream at her to just disappear because she can't stand her type. Standing her ground, Fairy firmly declares that no matter what the heroine says, she has no intention of leaving Muse unless he asks it himself. Enraged by her defiance, Villainess raises her hand to slap Fairy, screaming that the situation is unbelievable. Before the blow can land, a hand shoots out and catches Villainess's wrist in a firm grip. Lord Marion intervenes to protect Fairy, ignoring Villainess's frantic attempts to claim he has the situation all wrong. The future knight captain glares coldly at Liline, appalled that she would resort to violence against a pregnant woman. Liline freezes in shock at the revelation, stuttering in confusion as the reality of Fairy's pregnancy shatters her understanding of the plot. Horrified that the timeline is breaking, Liline trembles and decides she must report this impossibility to Muse immediately. She frantically recalls the fandisc content, realizing that Muse's romantic timeline wasn't supposed to advance for another 3 years. Liline spirals into despair, unable to accept that the story where she nurtures love with Muse and marries him later has been completely destroyed. Muse rushes into the classroom in a panic, desperately asking Fairy if she is hurt anywhere or if she is in pain. Muse frantically checks her face and body for injuries while Fairy calmly assures him that she only talked to the transfer student and wasn't hit. The surrounding female students shriek with excitement at the dramatic and intimate display of affection between the couple. Muse pulls Fairy into a tight, protective embrace, declaring that he doesn't care if the whole classroom stares at them. The classroom erupts into squeals and oddly deep screams as the students react to the romantic scene unfolding before them. Muse whispers that he wouldn't know how to live if anything happened to her, leaving Fairy thinking he is being overly dramatic yet sweet. Fairy is internally overwhelmed by how cute Muse is, accidentally wondering if she voiced her thoughts aloud as she blushes furiously. The watching students swoon over the scene, calling it storybook perfect and admitting their jealousy of Lady Fairy's love life. Fairy's insecurity creeps in as she wonders if he only married her out of responsibility for the pregnancy and if the heroine's arrival will change his feelings. Muse suddenly cuts through her dark thoughts by looking her in the eyes and earnestly confessing that he loves her. Muse silences the room with a passionate kiss, prompting Fairy to tearfully reciprocate his feelings amidst the shock of their classmates. Muse pulls away and teases her about the Muse-sama nickname she used earlier, declaring the kiss a punishment and a reward while the class screams again. Later in a carriage, Fairy sits on Muse's lap and questions their position, while Muse asks if she is truly okay after the lunch break incident. Muse confronts the transfer student, accusing her of trying to hit Fairy after the heroine returned to class. Muse recalls threatening the heroine with a terrifying expression, vowing to crush her with everything he has if she ever messes with Fairy again. Fairy thinks back to how terrifying Muse was in that moment but decides that everything will likely work out fine. She rationalizes that pushing the heroine too hard might leave the girl with nowhere to exist in this world. Glancing at her phone, Fairy reflects on how the Muse-sama, in her game save file, always felt like hers until a fangirl appeared in her past life too. She mentally reviews the game's cast, which includes Crown Prince Heldrius, Hugo, Marion, Killian, and Muse, the Marquis' son. Fairy checks the popularity polls on her device, noting that while the prince was number 1, Muse ranked lower because his route was difficult to clear. Despite the rankings, she smiles as she thinks about how Muse's razor-sharp beauty and shy cuteness were always unique and special to her. She contemplates the setting where commoners like the orphan heroine can attend the academy if they have the grades, though she finds the kind Viscount backstory vague. Back in the present, Muse admits he was lenient to avoid saddening the Viscount couple, but he firmly promises to protect Fairy regardless. Muse pulls her closer and vows to protect her, but Fairy asserts that she isn't a weak woman and will protect him in return. 2 weeks later, Fairy hosts a tea party at Lammas Manor for her friends Susanna and Alloway, who immediately comment on her happy appearance. Her friends tease her about the pregnancy news being written all over her face and congratulate her on the wedding. They laugh about the rumor that the Ice Prince has transformed into the Blazing Prince due to his passionate married life. Muse suddenly appears in the garden to greet them, shocking the friends who bring up the rumor about the classroom kiss. Muse flashes a charming smile at the guests and asks Lady Leonce and Lady Yosef to continue taking good care of his wife. Muse departs for work after reminding Fairy to be careful not to trip, leaving her flustered as her friends watch the affectionate display. Fairy's friends are left in disbelief after seeing Muse smile, questioning if that man was truly the same person they knew. They conclude that his devotion goes far beyond the rumors, while Fairy calmly encourages the shocked ladies to eat their treats. The group continues their tea party in the garden, chatting amidst the serene atmosphere. In a flashback, the transfer student Liline attempts to get close to the prince, only for him to awkwardly apologize and ask her to step back. Killian observes that even Marion seems to dislike Liline now, noting that she has lost favor with Muse and others since the incident. Fairy and Muse walk through the garden discussing lunch, while Fairy internally remarks on the grit required for Liline to not give up. Lady Ariza interrupts their stroll, politely asking if she might borrow a moment of Lord Lamist and Lady Fairy's time. Ariza, the daughter of Viscount Zarbo, nervously approaches them with a request she fears might sound presumptuous. She boldly asks if she can write a novel using the couple as her models, catching Fairy completely off guard. Muse asks if she is a writer, and Ariza confirms by showing them a romance book she wrote titled Akisti and Koa. Ariza explains that her friend loves her super sweet romances and that seeing Fairy and Muse together inspired her because they are so lovely. Muse turns to Fairy to ask her opinion, and when she says she doesn't mind, Ariza beams with delight at the chance to use them as models. Fairy notes that Ariza gives off small animal vibes despite her awful first impression, while the aspiring author asks how the couple first met. Muse dramatically claims he fell in love at first sight, which Ariza finds romantic, though Fairy looks skeptical at his fabricated story. Muse spins a tale about a dissolved engagement with a Lady Caritia due to troubling signs, claiming their houses were perfectly matched otherwise. He details how House Ramana specialized in waterworks and agreed to support the disaster-struck Lamist lands with technology and funds for flood control. Muse explains that his father proposed the engagement to Fairy to secure this ducal backing permanently rather than as a one-off connection. In the present, Fairy notices Muse drawing and asks about it, while he reflects that he used to view people solely by their usefulness to his house. Fairy teases him about his drawing skills, and when Muse retorts that he is having fun, she jokingly asks if his terrible art counts as fun. Muse reveals he stopped smiling and making things he liked because his face attracted the wrong kind of attention and annoyed him. Fairy sketches a rose and shows it to him, prompting Muse to demand the paper so he can see her work up close. He calls her a genius and excitedly promises to draw more, his mood lifting instantly as Fairy asks how she got so good. Ariza interprets the story as a tale of true love that fills Muse with joy, concluding that he is deeply in love with Fairy. Muse internally admits that while it is ridiculous, he doesn't hate the way he hangs on Fairy's expressions and gestures. Back in reality, Muse sips tea and expresses his displeasure at the stares they are receiving due to a letter sent to Fairy. Fairy argues that she should at least hear the sender out, but Muse angrily questions why she needs to listen to the transfer student's problems. Muse becomes furious at the idea of her meeting a man alone, asking if she is trying to make him jealous because he absolutely hates it. Fairy clarifies that she just wants to help, leaving Muse stunned and wondering if he managed to marry a literal goddess. Later, Killian approaches Fairy and awkwardly asks for her opinion on Liline's recent behavior. When Fairy politely calls Liline energetic, Killian notes her kindness and admits he didn't really know the girl before this. Killian reveals that he met Liline at an orphanage when he was small, explaining that she lost her parents young and then her foster mother passed away. He recalls being truly happy when her adoption was decided because she remained bright and adorable even when left all alone. Killian explains that Liline started acting strange and saying bizarre things like, "True lover," once talk of transferring to the academy began. She excitedly declared that she could finally meet the love interests, including her favorite, Muse-sama, leaving Killian bewildered. Fairy feels like this is less of a consultation and more of a monologue, noting that the information feels like it's coming from a game tutorial. Fairy mentally reviews Killian's character data, recalling that he is the only child of a count's house and noting the true end, where he rebuilds his family. She remembers that in the bad end, Killian falls into darkness to become an underworld boss, and in another ending he creepily marries the heroine's child. Back in the present, Fairy bluntly asks Lord Killian if he likes Lady Liline, catching him off guard. Killian admits he did like her but confesses that the current Liline is abnormal and he has lost sight of his feelings. He asks Fairy what he should do, admitting he doesn't know the right words to handle the situation anymore. Fairy suggests that maybe he should try taking some distance, as she doesn't know Liline's true feelings or what Killian truly wants. Killian agrees with her advice, realizing that sometimes you can't see things clearly when you are too close to the situation. He thanks Fairy for her help and shyly asks if he can come to speak with her again, to which she agrees. A few days later, Fairy worries if her advice to take distance was the right move, playing dumb when asked if she knows what true lover is. Fairy suddenly hears a commotion in the restroom where Liline is being accosted by a group of jealous girls. The bullies accuse Liline of flirting with His Highness and not knowing her place, screaming that she belongs crawling on a filthy floor. Liline is shoved into a toilet stall with a thud, complaining that it's the worst place to be stuck while the girls continue their assault. Fairy steps in, coldly asking the girls what they think they are doing and stating that violence is where she draws the line. The bullies claim they were just scolding her, but Fairy sharply asks if surrounding someone and shouting insults counts as scolding. Fairy's intense, villainous face intimidates the girls, who quickly back down, claiming she must have misheard them. The terrified girls scramble to leave, making excuses about a teacher calling for them as they flee the scene. Fairy sighs that her villainous face comes in handy sometimes and tells Liline to stand up because the floor is dirty. Liline demands to know why Fairy helped her before turning away and snapping that she shouldn't think she owes her one. Fairy admits she forgot her appointment because of a bathroom run-in, but she assures Muse that everything is on track as they arrive for her routine checkup. Lady Mia, the attending physician, scolds Fairy for eating unbalanced meals despite having only mild morning sickness, warning that the child will lack nutrition. Muse steps in to support his wife by promising to do the exercises with her starting today, while Fairy feels the sting of the doctor's accurate criticism. The doctor advises the couple to hold off on nighttime activities until the stable period, causing Muse to blush while insisting that he is already holding back. Lady Mia emphasizes that Fairy's body is the top priority, though she comforts the worried couple by confirming everything will be okay once the stable period is reached. The physician notes that while she thought Muse was the slow and steady type, he seems unable to help himself around Fairy, though she admits it is good as long as they are happy. Lady Mia marvels that watching Muse brag about love is like a dream, comparing his intense devotion to that of Lady Chris. Fairy realizes Muse's single-mindedness is inherited from his father-in-law, while Muse privately wonders how exactly Fairy's face resembles her mother's. Muse begins assisting Fairy with the exercises, which she recognizes as stretches from her past life, though he finds the positions slightly awkward. Fairy focuses on her foot and toe work, noting that Lady Mia's progressive advice for moderate movement contrasts with this world's tendency to coddle pregnant women. Muse watches Fairy concentrate on her toe exercises and finds the sight of her wiggling feet so adorable that he deems resistance impossible. He embraces Fairy from behind and compliments her voice, internally lamenting that he is making absolutely zero progress in holding back his affection. Flustered by the intimacy, Fairy asks Muse if he would be happier having a boy or a girl. Muse instantly rejects the question, stating that either gender is fine and that the child will be adorable as long as they take after Fairy. When Fairy asks about the baby taking after him, Muse insists he wants the child to be exactly like her, confessing he has found her cute since she was little. Muse worries that a child resembling him might suffer because of their looks just as he did, prompting him to ask Fairy if she dislikes his appearance. Fairy reassures him by calling him a gentle worrywart dad, dismissing the public perception of him as the emotionless ice prince. Muse prepares to leave for a river inspection at the royal castle, apologizing to Fairy that he cannot accompany her to the academy today. While combing Fairy's hair, Muse frets about letting her go alone because the Lammas lands are vulnerable to rain and the rivers swell quickly. Muse worries that the transfer student might try something again, but Fairy confidently reassures him multiple times that she will be fine. Two male students suddenly intercept Fairy at the academy, pledging to protect her with everything they have if the need arises. The bystanders are shocked by the intense expressions on the students' faces as they shield Fairy from the rain, though she insists she is fine. A classmate greets Fairy and questions the presence of the two male escorts, prompting Fairy to explain that Muse had an urgent matter to attend to. The boys reveal that Muse sent a fast horse at dawn to order them to act as escorts, which the girls interpret as a sign of his immense love. Fairy heads to the library while the students swoon over Lord Lamast's overwhelming love and chronic worry for his wife. One of the male students tells Fairy he has decided to forget about Liline, admitting he witnessed something delightful that changed his perspective. He explains that seeing Liline this morning made it clear she is no longer the girl he once knew, so he is done with her. The conversation shifts to the Hendrik lands, with the student noting they are mostly cotton and confirming rumors that the house is on the verge of collapse. The student analyzes the situation, stating that if the domain had been run normally, the profits would have remained stable. Fairy realizes the Hendrik domain's failed reforms and near collapse match the game's setting exactly, leaving her wondering what the last head was thinking. Fairy has a sudden realization that innards refers to the fluffy material inside the plant, finally understanding the true nature of cotton. Hendrik explains that because this world lacks cotton fluff, cushions are uncomfortably stuffed with fabric scraps, so he invites Fairy to inspect the raw cotton. Upon arriving at the Hendrik domain, the student welcomes the couple to his family's vast farmlands and leads them toward the warehouse. Hendrik reveals that they originally planned to build a mill, but their partner company moved away, leaving them with surplus cotton and no capital. Following Hendrik's lead, the The group proceeds deeper into the facility to examine the stockpile of unprocessed cotton. Hendrik explains that debt and falling prices from neighboring competition forced his father to convert the cotton fields to other crops. Fairy listens to the family history and wonders if Killian actually inherited that specific risky personality trait. Fairy spots the unprocessed cotton sheets and immediately asks to buy them, surprising Hendrik with her interest in the raw material. She explains her plan to create a nude cushion by stuffing the raw cotton into a cover, and Hendrik agrees to let them take some. Fairy presents the finished cotton-stuffed cushion to Muse, who touches it and is instantly captivated by its light and unique texture. Hendrik compares it to the knobby cushions he is used to and is amazed by how incredibly light and fluffy the cotton version is. He gratefully accepts Fairy's idea to sell them to save the domain, offering to return a portion of the profits as a fee for the interdomain trade. Muse advises Hendrik to secure a patent immediately, warning that the simple design will be easy for others to copy if he isn't careful. Just as Killian predicted, the cotton-stuffed cushions become a smash hit, prompting Hendrik to thank the couple for saving his domain. Muse notes that by branding it a patented specialty and pricing it boldly, they boosted local employment and made the product a massive success. Muse scolds Hendrik for being too familiar with Fairy, while Fairy happily hugs her cushion, completely oblivious to his jealousy. Leoline suddenly interrupts the peaceful scene, accusing Fairy of harassment and claiming she is finally showing her true colors as a villainess. She slams a ruined textbook onto the table and dramatically asserts that Lady Fairy is the only possible culprit responsible for the damage. Muse coldly intervenes to ask what she wants, while Leoline insists this is the condemnation event that will doom the fiancé. Muse dismisses the accusation as ridiculous because Fairy wouldn't bother with her, but Leoline declares that her comeback starts right now. Fairy is confused, wondering if this event was part of the game script, while Leoline stubbornly insists only Fairy would do such a thing. Muse dismantles her logic by pointing out that Fairy attends classes and rides home with him immediately, leaving no time for sabotage. Leoline falters when asked what she actually knows about Fairy, but she desperately tries to maintain that Fairy is the guilty party. Muse passionately defends his wife, describing her as gentle as a goddess in both body and soul, leaving Fairy bewildered by his intensity. The crowd turns on Leoline, suggesting she is the one at fault or that someone sick of her clinging to His Highness did it. Muse issues a chilling warning, asking Leoline if she truly wants to learn how terrifying it is to make House Lamest her enemy. Leoline retreats, admitting she might have been mistaken, while Fairy wonders why her attempt to be a villainess failed yet again. Leoline whispers about not wanting to anger her favorite character but then snaps at Fairy, accusing her of trying to make her mad. Muse demands to know why she calls Fairy a wicked lady, arguing that Leoline is the one who actually fits that description. Leoline panics internally, unable to understand why the story is going off script from the game and why nothing makes sense anymore. Leoline spirals into a mental breakdown, unable to comprehend why she, the heroine destined to be loved by everyone, is hearing such harsh rejection. Muse firmly declares that he has belonged solely to Fairy since their engagement, leaving Leoline stunned by his absolute rejection of her delusional fantasy. The surrounding students break into applause at Muse's declaration, leaving Leoline trembling and utterly bewildered by the crowd's reaction. A teacher intervenes to address the situation, stating that while the academy does not condone harassment, they believe Leoline bears significant responsibility for what occurred. Leoline protests to Miss Shirley, claiming she is the victim and pointing out that Lord Lamest scolded her, but the teacher remains unmoved by her plea. Miss Shirley reveals that despite Leoline being new, the academy has received numerous complaints from students regarding her behavior, which they had been observing. The teacher explains that they waited at His Highness's request, but Leoline's lack of distance with the male students is wholly inappropriate for noble society. When Leoline cries unfairness, Miss Shirley counters that while harassment isn't justified, Leoline must restrain herself to avoid such situations. Miss Shirley announces that a meeting with the Viscount couple is necessary due to Leoline's out-of-line behavior and language, shocking the girl who still insists she is the victim. The teacher warns that Leoline's reckless conduct extends beyond herself and threatens to tarnish the reputation the Viscount couple worked hard to build. Miss Shirley advises Leoline to watch her words and actions if she truly cares about the people who took her in. Leoline reflects on her past life as an ordinary student, lamenting that nothing is working and she is causing trouble for her foster parents despite finally meeting Muse. In her previous life, she lost friends due to her obsession but didn't care as long as she had Muse-sama, falling headfirst into the game, True Lover. She was a hardcore fan who refused to share her favorite character, viewing Muse as beauty incarnate and her absolute property. Liline recalls dying in the summer of her first year of high school, stepping into a crosswalk at a red light while glued to her phone. Her final regret was dying before she could unlock all of Muse-sama's CGs, a conviction that carried over to her new life. Determined to stay bright in this new life, she was struck by bad luck again, losing her parents and her foster mother early on. Taken into an orphanage arranged by her late foster mother, Liline met Killian and suddenly regained her past life memories. Realizing she was in the world of true lover, she studied brutally hard to get into the academy after being adopted by a Viscount family years later. Liline entered the academy believing she could finally meet Muse, but strangely, she couldn't find him at all for the first week. She is horrified to realize the villainous Fairy is present and married to Muse, leading her to conclude Fairy is a reincarnator who stole her role. Back in the present, Muse comforts a weary Fairy, who thanks him for protecting her after the exhausting confrontation. Fairy basks in Muse's affection, thinking that even the game wasn't this sweet, while Muse nuzzles her and compliments her scent. Muse smiles at her, mentioning the upcoming stable period, and Fairy decides she is allowed to be a little full of herself as she enjoys his love. Muse clings to Fairy after their bath, refusing to let go now that she has finally entered the stable period. He notes that her belly isn't showing yet, triggering a flashback to their noon house call with the doctor. Lady Mia explains that visible pregnancy signs vary by person and assures the couple not to worry. The doctor advises Fairy to apply moisturizing cream and massage her belly once it starts to show. Muse eagerly volunteers to perform the massage as a husband's duty, reminding the doctor of her own past. Back in the present, Muse gazes at Fairy with intense affection, bringing her focus solely to him. He gently reminds her that she doesn't have to go to the academy tomorrow, setting a relaxed mood. Fairy realizes that Lady Mia gave permission for them to resume intimate activities. Muse promises to be gentle and leaves the final decision to Fairy, respecting her comfort. Fairy feels a sudden wave of nervousness, admitting that the happiness feels almost unreal. Muse asks permission to touch her, confessing that he is almost scared by the depth of his own joy. He vows to make her even happier from now on as he leans in close. The couple embraces in the darkness, sharing a tender and passionate night together. Morning arrives with the sound of chirping birds, signaling the start of a new day. Fairy wakes up and is immediately overwhelmed by Muse's dazzling morning charm. Muse teases her for making 100 different expressions so early in the morning. He helps her dress and compliments her, stating that the word charm suits her far better. Prince Heldrius interrupts their moment, causing Muse to click his tongue in obvious annoyance. Heldrius demands to be introduced to Muse's wife, ignoring the hostile reception. Muse reluctantly acknowledges the prince, who laughs off his childhood friend's arrogant attitude. Hugo Aurelius, the prince's aide, greets them politely, though Muse remains protective. Muse refuses to let Heldrius get close, bluntly stating that Fairy will be defiled by him. Fairy recognizes the two men as capture targets from the game True Lover. She recalls that Prince Heldrius was popular for the gap between his official persona and his sweet side. The group exchanges formal greetings, but the tension between Muse and the prince persists. Fairy wonders why Heldrius is so persistent about the introduction despite Muse's clear refusal. Muse finally introduces Fairy but physically shields her, keeping the prince at a distance. Fairy notes that their relationship is different from the game, citing Muse's jealousy as the cause. Heldrius notices Liline's absence and asks where that girl has gone. Hugo reveals that Liline has been suspended for a week, and both men deny having any serious relationship with her. Prince Heldrius explains that he treated the girl as if she wasn't there because she wouldn't listen, claiming he simply wanted to be kind to everyone while his listener calls him awful. Liline falls into despair wondering what she has done to deserve this outcome, and the story abruptly shifts to 1 week later. Muse reflects that Lady Negan is returning tomorrow and resolves to explain the situation himself, acknowledging that his servant's actions were ultimately an extension of his will. A servant announces the arrival of Lady Charline, and the prince apologizes to the dining group for the sudden interruption. Fairy recognizes Charline as another fiancée from the game True Lover, and notes with surprise that Liline is present as well. Fairy recalls that she only played Muse's route and skimmed the official guide, leaving her confused as to why unchosen fiancés are interacting in this timeline. Charline enters the room with an intense gaze that makes Fairy flinch, wondering if the noblewoman is angry about the gathering. Ignoring the others, Charline walks straight toward Liline with a stern expression, casting a shadow over the seated girl. She introduces herself formally as Charline, the daughter of Duke Rismond, establishing her superior status immediately. Charline coldly asks Liline if she understands her current position regarding her recent suspension from the academy. She criticizes Liline's attire, specifically pointing out the ribbon she is wearing and asking if she understands its significance. Liline looks confused, prompting Charline to explain that the roan ribbon is not merely a cute fashion accessory. Charline reveals that in their culture, that specific ribbon is tied by a lover and meant to be untied only by that lover in private moments. When asked if she knew this, Liline frantically denies it, claiming she just thought it was a cute accessory. Charline declares that ignorance is a sin in noble society and points out that Liline's careless behavior invited the very misunderstandings she now claims to be a victim of. Overwhelmed by the harsh public scolding and the realization of her error, Liline bursts into tears and runs out of the room. Prince Heldrius watches the scene with a smile, clearly impressed by Charline's decisive handling of the problem. He praises her for her actions, but Charline turns her cold gaze upon him instead of accepting his compliment. She tells the prince that he is also guilty, as his permissive attitude allowed the situation to escalate to this point. Heldrius defends himself with a smile, claiming that he simply wanted to be kind to every girl regardless of who they are. Charline retorts that such vague and indiscriminate kindness is actually a form of cruelty when it leads to false hope and scandal. She sighs in exasperation, noting that she is used to his behavior, while Fairy watches the dynamic with great interest. Charline turns to Fairy and apologizes for the disturbance, but Fairy is simply awestruck by how cool and dignified she is. Internally, Charline is screaming with excitement, revealing that she is actually a huge admirer of Fairy and never dreamed she could get this close to her idol. Charline reflects on her past, noting that her parents loved splendor and her brother loved too much, leaving her longing for simplicity amidst the flashiness forced upon her. She feels that flashy things do not suit her witch-like appearance of black hair and red eyes inherited from her foreign mother. Despite her intimidating exterior, she reveals that she actually loves quiet moments and reading romance novels in sunlit spots. Known as the Black Rose Princess, she endured strict training to match her royalty-level status but held on to the belief that love must be something beautiful. She looks at Fairy and Muse, seeing in them the ideal, beautiful love she has always read about and longed to witness in reality. Charline vows internally to protect Fairy and her beautiful romance, solidifying her new resolve to guard the couple as she gazes at her idol. Charline explains that although the prince's engagement to a neighboring princess fell through due to politics, he still secretly holds another princess in his heart. She reveals that despite the empty position, His Highness became hopelessly loose with women, leaving Fairy shocked by this scandalous reputation. Heldrius smiles and claims it would be rude not to be kind to girls, but Charline sharply retorts that his indiscriminate kindness only confuses everyone. The prince teases Charline by calling her jealousy cute, causing her to stammer in shock at his shameless deflection. Fairy is baffled by the contradiction, noting that despite his frivolous behavior with women, the crown prince is known to be extremely competent in public office. Narrative confirms his achievements, detailing how he implemented nationwide sewer systems, created jobs for the poor, and successfully lowered crime rates. Charline recalls a time he invited her on an inspection trip to Nispana, touching her heart with a handwritten letter that felt like a genuine date invitation. He charmed her with a radiant smile and an invitation to explore the town, making her heart flutter as she accepted his arm. Just as he praised her beautiful hair and called her lovely, he abruptly shifted his attention to another woman with a casual, "next one," shattering the moment. Charline stood frozen in shock as the prince immediately walked away to charm a passing woman, leaving her completely abandoned in the street. Back at the inn hours later, he casually remarked that she seemed to be having fun with others, while she felt the cruelty of being left behind. When he called her jealousy cute, Charline snapped and called him the worst, realizing with horror that she had become a nasty, jealous woman. Charline lashed out at him for being a jerk, while he accepted her anger with a somber expression that hinted at hidden depths. She decided to stop caring after he apologized, resolving to keep her distance from His Highness to protect her own heart. Charline tells Hugo that whoever marries him will be happy since he apologized on the prince's behalf, praising the aide's integrity. Hugo listens to her praise in silence, his expression unreadable as he absorbs her kind words about his suitability as a partner. Fairy observes the prince and realizes that his kindness extends to all female students, not just Liline, confirming Charline's assessment. Charline denies staring but admits that his calculated behavior turns her stomach, though she acknowledges that Liline isn't the only one at fault. Fairy admits she wants to get closer to Charline because she finds the black rose lovely, asking Muse if she can invite her over. Muse agrees to host a tea party at their estate to keep the riffraff away, prompting Fairy to extend the formal invitation. Charline's stoic facade instantly crumbles into pure delight as she accepts the invitation, causing Fairy to think she is surprisingly easy to please. Muse insists on applying the body cream early, citing confirmation that starting sooner is better. 5 months into the pregnancy, Fairy endures the rub-rub of the massage, finding the intimacy insanely embarrassing. Muse warns her to report any discomfort immediately, noting that her lower back and hips will take a hit as her belly grows. Fairy sighs that his overprotectiveness is getting worse, telling him he worries too much about others. Muse counters that his head is always full of thoughts about her, leaving Fairy to wonder if he thinks about anything else. Lady Chris laughs that Muse's intense devotion is genetic, confirming that his father was exactly the same way. The narrative shifts to the highly anticipated tea party, with both Fairy and Muse excited for the big day. Muse sends a luxurious 4-horse carriage to fetch the guest, which Fairy suspects is a flex of Rismond rank. Fairy explains that House Lamist and House Rismond aren't friendly, so this display is just her father-in-law's way of teasing. Charline arrives looking absolutely gorgeous in a dark dress, thanking everyone for the invitation. Muse and Fairy welcome her warmly, setting a polite tone for the visit. In a rare display of sociability, Muse flashes a dazzling smile and asks Charline to take good care of his wife. Charline praises the tea's calming aroma and the lovely cups, mentioning her father-in-law had the tea specially imported. She admires the serene interior of Lamist Manor, contrasting it with her own parents' lack of taste. Charline admits her family had 1,000 different opinions when she told them she was invited here. Fairy is shocked to learn that Charline's elaborate hairstyle takes 2 hours to style every single morning. Charline confesses she actually prefers simple things and feels that spending precious mornings like this is a waste. Fairy asks if Charline dislikes her fiancé, Prince Heldrius, noting the annoyed expression on her face. Charline frankly admits that there are times she thinks about how nice it would be to call the engagement off. When Fairy asks if she likes unfaithful men, Charline firmly declares she does not like them at all. Charline reveals she accepted the invitation because she has admired Fairy and Muse as a couple for the longest time. She describes seeing them stand side by side after enrolling and realizing they were her absolute ideal. Charline sighs that His Highness is a bit too free-spirited, politely confirming he is a womanizer. She asks Fairy if they can relax and talk freely without their usual noble filters, since it is just the two of them. Fairy happily agrees, and Charline shyly requests to be called by her nickname, Shul. Charline brings up Lady Liline, admitting she feels she did something awful regarding the girl. She confesses she was actually hoping Liline would try hard enough to win His Highness's heart away from her. Charline reveals she was ready to pay consolation money from her own assets just to escape the arranged marriage. After clearing the air, Charline smiles and asks about Fairy's health. She praises Fairy as a hard worker for studying while pregnant, though Fairy notes her morning sickness was mild. Fairy reflects that normally, discovering a pregnancy would mean quitting the academy and spending the months quietly until delivery. She recalls that back then, with her past life memories freshly returned, she insisted on an education to secure her future because she couldn't fully trust Muse yet. The conversation shifts as Fairy asks Charline what kind of person she likes, causing the guest to blush furiously. Charline shyly admits she likes the cute type she can protect, while Muse listens from another room and promises not to laugh at her naming struggles. Fairy is surprised by the preference, but Charline passionately argues that she wants to support someone with a severe face because the gap is adorable. Flustered by Fairy calling her super cute, Charline covers her face in embarrassment. Fairy guesses she is talking about Lord Killian, revealing he has a secret, dark side, setting that shocks Charline. Charline panics and denies knowing any adorable gentleman named Killian, accusing Fairy of overreacting. Fairy sighs that His Highness is hopeless for leaving such a lovely girl alone, secretly thinking Killian and Charline might actually suit each other. Charline suddenly lowers her voice and asks Fairy to keep a secret, creating an air of intimacy between them. She reveals that the prince asked her to go out just the two of them, leaving Fairy gasping in shock. A maid interrupts with tea, but the two continue whispering about the date scheduled for next week. Charline explains that he suddenly showed up and asked for a date, despite never paying her any mind before. He declared they should spend more time together since they are engaged, but Charline admits she turned him down initially because they've never done anything like that. She angrily recalls how they went out once before and he flirted with another woman right in front of her. Fairy agrees that anyone would be mad at such behavior, dreading what the unpredictable prince might do this time. Charline hopes that since he came to invite her himself, maybe this time it will actually be nice. She warns that if it's the same as before, she'll complain for hours, then suddenly asks Fairy a question. Charline asks if Fairy's type is still Lord Lamest, and Fairy smiles brightly while confirming it. Fairy admits she longs for love like in stories, prompting Charline to mention they have a novelist classmate. Charline reveals the classmate writes romances, leaving Fairy stunned that she had no idea about this hidden talent. Muse listens in and is excited for the next tea party, while Fairy resolves to protect Charline from getting hurt again. Later in the library, Muse reveals that Heldrius has always liked Charline, surprising Fairy with this new information. Muse explains that Hugo apparently tore into His Highness after hearing the disastrous details of the last date. Fairy is surprised to hear Hugo refused a match, realizing the situation differs from the game again. Fairy tries to process the tangled relationships, noting Hugo's pining for Charline and Charline's curiosity about Killian. Muse teases Fairy, asking if she's thinking about Shoal, Hugo, or perhaps Heldrius. The scene shifts to Muse confronting Heldrius, telling him to stop being roundabout and just be honest since the date is next week. Muse advises the prince to show his love through actions rather than staying hated, challenging his friend's passive approach. Heldrius smiles wryly, admitting that Charline was love at first sight, while realizing he never expected a lecture on dropping his nasty habits. Prince Heldrius gazes out the window and recalls the time he stayed at the Rismond villa for his health, where he first saw her in the garden. A young Charline spots him and demands to know what he is doing there, instantly charming him with her cuteness. When she introduces herself, he hesitates to reply, remembering the strict rule that royals must not give their names lightly. He impulsively borrows his friend's name and introduces himself as Hugo, asking if she would like to play with him. He hides his identity and spends his days playing with her, choosing to ignore the whispered rumors about Lady Charline. Heldrius questions the fairness of her situation, wondering why her life is burdened with such heaviness despite her innocence. Realizing his presence as a prince puts her in danger, he decides he must ensure no one finds out how much he cares for her. He resolves to mask his true feelings by acting friendly with every girl he meets, using the womanizer persona as a shield for Charline. Back in the present, he sighs at the memory and recalls Muse's lecture, steeling himself to finally be honest about his love. Determined to change, he takes Charline on a proper date to the downtown district to spend time together. The area is bustling with activity, and he notes that there are quite a lot of people crowding the streets. He reaches out to grab Charline's hand, insisting that they must hold on to each other so they don't get separated. Charline glances at him and lets out a small giggle, blushing as she accepts his hand. Heldrius turns to her amidst the crowd and asks if she remembers the very first day they met. When she guesses it was their engagement day, he gently corrects her by revealing that their first meeting was actually much earlier. He asks if the time she was 6 years old at her family's villa rings a bell, confusing her even more. Heldrius drops the facade and reveals that the boy reading in the garden with her back then was actually him. Charline is struck by a sudden realization, her eyes widening as the pieces of her memory finally click together. She covers her mouth in shock, asking if that blonde boy with violet eyes was really His Highness, and he confirms it. Heldrius holds her hand and looks deep into her eyes, confessing that he has loved her from the very moment they first met. Prince Heldrius shatters the silence of the bustling street, boldly declaring his absolute love for Charline. Stunned by the sudden confession, Charline gapes in utter disbelief as she questions if His Highness truly means those words. Blushing furiously, she frantically waves her hands and accuses the royal of cruelly teasing her racing heart. Heldrius turns his piercing gaze toward her, dropping all pretenses to firmly state that he is completely serious. He solemnly confesses that his frivolous act pushed her away, admitting he would never blame her for giving up on him. Offering to void their engagement if she wishes, the prince smiles softly and claims this single day grants him a lifetime of happiness. Surprised by his vulnerability, Charline firmly refuses to give up over something so small, urging him to see his hidden motives through to the end. She fiercely demands he carry himself proudly as the crown prince, questioning if his beloved public image is nothing but a fragile illusion. Heldrius shrinks back in shock as she passionately scolds him, demanding to know where his former elegance vanished while he flaunted his frivolous behavior. Flushing bright red, Charline furiously denies his assumptions and yells that she has absolutely no idea what he is talking about. Commanding him to stop chasing other women, she demands he finally start courting her properly since they have never acted like a real engaged couple. As Heldrius warmly agrees, Charline lands a sudden blow by casually asking if he knew that Hugo likes him too. Panic instantly strikes the prince as he jealously whines that only he should get to spend precious time with his beloved. Muttering in pure frustration, Charline storms down the street calling him an idiot while the flustered prince desperately chases after her. The scene shifts to the Grand Palace, where a smirking Hugo casually asks His Highness how the highly anticipated date unfolded. Heldrius admits he received a harsh scolding, yet he smiles softly knowing Charline has not completely written him off yet. Settling into a plush chair, Heldrius reveals a dark secret from his youth at House Rismond, where he uncovered deadly assassins targeting a young Charline. He explains that while Charline was a prime candidate to be his fiancée, he was bound to marry a neighboring second princess to solve a bitter trade dispute. A brutal truth surfaced when the neighboring consort was executed by poison, exposing her as the ruthless mastermind behind the assassination attempts on Charline. Desperate to protect the innocent girl he loved, a young Heldrius found his twisted salvation in the sudden arrival of his boisterous uncle. Watching his reckless uncle sweet-talk every woman in sight, a brilliant and desperate plan sparked within the young prince's mind. Crushing his own honorable nature, he resolved to wear the mask of a frivolous flirt to permanently hide his true love from any future enemies. The memory shifts to a young Hugo visiting his royal friend, casually checking in on the recovering prince's health. Heldrius jumps in absolute shock when Hugo casually asks if he knows a girl named Charline, proving their tangled fates began long ago. Shocked by the sudden revelation, Charline gasps in disbelief that his childhood name was also Hugo. Sweating nervously, Heldrius sincerely apologizes for hijacking his best friend's identity all those years ago. Reclining comfortably, Hugo calmly explains that he deduced the royal secret instantly and covered for his friend. Heldrius stares in confusion, asking why his friend would go to such extreme lengths to protect him. To secure the deception, Hugo steps up to shield the lie, prompting Heldrius to frantically reveal he already tricked the innocent girl with a fake magic excuse. The young prince admits her pure innocence deeply terrifies his anxious heart. Dropping his casual demeanor, Hugo softly confesses that Charline is incredibly precious to him as well. He gently suggests they go apologize together, leaving the young prince sitting in stunned silence. A decade passes before the two are finally reunited through a revived engagement, bringing them back into each other's orbit. Gazing downward with a heavy sigh, Heldrius laments that his actions only succeeded in making his beloved furious. Desperate to deepen their bond, Heldrius arranged a formal inspection as an excuse to finally take her on a date. However, he realizes his deeply ingrained frivolous act only managed to push her further away. His grand romantic plans are completely ruined by a persistent woman continuously disguising herself to approach him. Frustration boils within him as this unwanted interference shatters his precious time with Charline. Trying to unmask the suspicious stalker, Heldrius foolishly decides to play along with her advances. Caught in the terrible act, he turns with a pale, sweating face to frantically apologize to a devastated Charline. The mysterious woman is finally revealed as Princess Ashery, the very royal whose engagement to Heldrius was cancelled long ago. Through bitter tears, she confesses her desperate mission to offer herself as a mere side consort. Discovering her tragic history of mistreatment, Heldrius pities the foolish princess and rushes to wrap up the dreadful situation. He returns only to face Charline's burning wrath as she fiercely brands him the absolute worst. Bound by his secret, Heldrius simply swallows the pain and refuses to burden Charline with the dark truth. The inspection collapses entirely, ripping an impossible, widening chasm between their hearts. Watching a loving couple stand brightly together, Heldrius realizes there is another path forward. He vows that to truly protect the woman he loves, he must do it with his own two hands instead of hiding behind lies. Confronting his old rival, Heldrius casually admits he revealed Hugo's lingering feelings to Charline. Hugo stares back in sheer disbelief, stunned that the prince would openly share such a dangerous secret. Exploding in sudden rage, Hugo slams his fist and fiercely asks if the prince has lost his mind. He issues a blazing ultimatum, warning Heldrius that if he doesn't step up, Hugo will steal Charline for himself. Cooling his fiery temper, Hugo flashes a soft, loyal smile toward his lifelong friend. He sincerely prays that Heldrius can finally build a beautiful, lasting relationship with Charline for his own sake. Deeply moved by the fierce outburst, the prince realizes just how intensely Hugo still cares for the girl. Staring into the unknown, Heldrius admits he has absolutely no idea which man Charline will ultimately choose. Despite the fierce rivalry for her heart, a powerful, unwavering resolve anchors his soul. Heldrius fiercely prays that no matter what future unfolds, Charline remains forever wrapped in bright, glowing happiness. The scene slams back to the sunlit tea party as Charline drops the explosive revelation that His Highness confessed his love. Flushing furiously, she explains his entire frivolous persona was nothing but a desperate, necessary act of survival. Processing the massive twist, Charline drops another bombshell by revealing that Hugo also harbors deep romantic feelings for her. Fairy gleefully cheers that she knew the truth all along, while Charline sighs that the prince's act was born of pure cowardice. Thrilled by the juicy gossip, Fairy leans in and desperately demands every single romantic detail of the confession. Charline frantically covers her blushing face, flatly refusing to spill any more embarrassing secrets to her eager friend. Nibbling on a sweet cookie, Charline blinks in surprise when Fairy asks for her actual response to the royal confession. With a completely straight face, she casually admits she just ended up brutally scolding the prince. Staring forward with steady determination, Charline refuses to let him off the hook so easily. She firmly declares that if he truly wants her, he must put in the absolute effort to improve his behavior from now on. Fairy playfully brands the prince a spineless wimp for lacking the raw courage to face his own emotions. Meanwhile, Charline frowns in frustration, annoyed that His Highness automatically assumed she would run away and break their engagement. Gazing thoughtfully into the distance, Charline finally acknowledges her own flaws in their tangled relationship. With a soft breath, she admits she never truly made an honest effort to understand the man hiding behind the royal mask. Smiling softly, Charline touches her chin and decides she will start her new approach by simply getting to know the prince. Fairy cheerfully praises her guest as ridiculously cool and cute, noting that His Highness definitely has good taste. Touching her cheek in dismay, Charline admits her severe looks cause people to flinch even at the most gentle warnings. Bonding over their shared, villainous problems, the two girls laugh about how easily they accidentally terrify the people around them. Flashing a genuinely warm smile, Charline happily thanks Fairy while secretly praising her adorable friend as an absolute angel. Time flows forward to Fairy's 6th month of pregnancy, where a bustling muse immediately suggests ordering a baby cradle. Driven by his intense overprotectiveness, Muse insists they are actually completely behind schedule for gathering baby supplies. Fairy stares into a closet overflowing with tiny outfits, realizing she can no longer put off his eager preparations now that her belly is growing. Secretly longing to raise the child herself instead of using a traditional noble wet nurse, Fairy hesitates to demand even more from her devoted husband. Flipping through a catalog, Muse casually asks about wood choices while Fairy happily leaves the tasteful design elements entirely to his judgment. Catching her completely off guard, Muse flashes a knowing smile and smoothly asks where she wants the baby's bed placed. He gently suggests placing the cradle right in their room, proving he already deduced her secret desire to raise the child with her own 2 hands. Promising to help as much as possible, the loving husband assures her they can always rely on extra help if the burden gets too overwhelming. Shocked by his flawless mind-reading abilities, Fairy frantically covers her blushing face and accuses Muse of being an actual psychic. Overcome with profound joy, Fairy throws her arms around him and passionately declares how incredibly glad she is to be his wife. Gazing at her with absolute adoration, Muse softly confesses he would have never learned how to truly love anyone if he hadn't met her. Pulling her into a tender, emotional embrace, the expectant parents share a deeply romantic kiss on the sofa. The scene shifts abruptly to the bustling academy, where a flirtatious Lady Negan boldly approaches Prince Heldrius and begs for his time. Staring back with icy resolve, the newly reformed prince completely rejects her advances by firmly stating his engaged status. The rejected girl storms off in a huff while Fairy and the other onlookers stare in absolute shock at the royal's sudden display of utter faithfulness. Meanwhile, a furious Hugo crushes a textbook in his grip, blazing with jealous rage and threatening to turn the offending girl to dust. Snapping a pencil with pure, terrifying anger, Hugo projects a deadly aura that sends Fairy and Hendrik scrambling back in sheer panic. Sighing at his friend's chaotic outburst, Muse excuses himself to wash his hands and casually tasks Hendrik with guarding his precious wife. Flashing a polite smile, Hendrik turns toward a surprised Fairy and reveals he has a secret question he desperately needs to ask her. Glancing nervously around the academy, Fairy realizes she constantly feels like she is being watched. Beside her, A sweating Hendrik agrees that heavy eyes seem to follow them all over campus. Hendrik suddenly blushes and flashes a bright grin, excitedly wondering if his long-awaited popular phase has finally arrived. Fairy imagines a sparkling, adorable Killian effortlessly charming the girls around him. She notes with pure relief that this world's version of the boy possesses absolutely zero dark energy. Hendrik cheerfully announces that the highly anticipated New Year's festival is right around the corner. As Muse returns to warmly greet his wife, Fairy reflects on how surprisingly positive Hendrik is compared to his game counterpart. The narrative dives into the true lover game lore, highlighting the Academy's massive New Year's festival. Fairy recalls that Muse's specific romantic route always featured a thrilling trip through a haunted house. Gazing fondly at her husband, Fairy remembers how incredibly moving it was to see Muse finally smile during that specific game event. The homeroom teacher shatters her grand expectations by announcing their class will run a simple bazaar for the festival. Fairy immediately realizes her dream of exploring a haunted house is completely ruined. The teacher instructs the class to bring in unneeded items so all bazaar profits can be donated to charity. Fairy and Muse listen carefully as the festival preparations officially begin. Muse gently taps Fairy's shoulder and points across the bustling classroom. Fairy spots Prince Heldrius standing awkwardly in front of a completely unamused Charline. Losing her patience, Charline fiercely demands the wimpy prince spit it out and stop acting so shy. Blushing bright red, Heldrius finally gathers his courage to ask his beloved a vital question. Trembling with intense anxiety, Heldrius bites his tongue so hard he draws blood while asking her to the festival. Touched by his desperate and clumsy effort, Charline flashes a breathtakingly soft smile. She gently accepts his invitation, finally securing their long-awaited festival date. Exploding with triumph, the bleeding prince leaps into the air and wildly cheers for Muse to witness his victory. Muse tasks Charline with looking after Fairy while he and Hugo drag the overly excited prince away. Watching them leave, Charline smiles warmly and notes that his ridiculous behavior is absolute proof of his deep love. Suddenly, a sharp, commanding voice rings out and orders the two girls to stop right there. Lady Negan steps forward with a fierce glare. She boldly shatters their reality by loudly accusing both girls of being reincarnators. Liline confronts Fairy and Charline with a sharp glare, accusing them both of being reincarnators who have disrupted the game scenario. She claims their actions have changed the story, but Fairy feigns ignorance and asks if she is using some trendy buzzword. Liline furiously argues that she is the heroine and demands they stick to their villainous roles since Muse and the others are ignoring her. Charline retorts that becoming a fiancée to a capture target makes one a villainess, while Liline wonders if her comment about facial features hit a nerve. Liline insists that the setting of the game, True Lover, dictates their political engagements and determines their fates. Fairy coldly asks if she is confusing a fictional world with the reality she is currently living in. Charline points out that declaring oneself the sole heroine of the entire world is a bit too convenient. She acknowledges that everyone is the heroine of their own life, but suggests Liline is missing the bigger picture. Charline questions the logic of there being only one heroine for the entire world, leaving Liline confused and unable to comprehend the concept. She advises Liline to seek out the person she wants herself, but Liline panics that she cannot end up with anyone without a villain to oppose. Liline accuses them of using cheats to get ahead, but Charline interprets her complaint as simply relying on others. Charline asks for clarification on the term reincarnators, just as Muse and Hugo arrive to intervene in the escalating argument. Fairy realizes she cannot admit her own status, while Liline questions why the world isn't following the script she knows. Liline argues that everyone looks the same as in the game, but Fairy counters that daily thoughts and actions change the world. Fairy suggests consulting a specialist for the stress causing these delusions, while Muse and Hugo watch the unstoppable lecture unfold. A sudden movement breaks the tension as Charline steps forward to take charge of the situation. Charline offers to arrange everything for Liline to visit a doctor freely, assuring her that money and parental permission won't be issues. She insists on getting Liline checked up and drags the bewildered girl away, telling her not to shoulder the burden alone. A few days after the outburst, a new guest named Lady Ariza arrives at the mansion to thank Fairy for the invitation. The group gathers for a tea party where Charline excitedly greets the novelist Lady Ariza by her famous pen name, Lady Zarian. Charline reverently holds Ariza's hands, praising them for creating masterpieces, while Ariza shyly asks if they are disappointed by her appearance. Ariza mentions she is considering writing her next story about Fairy and Muse, which Charline declares would be absolutely wonderful. Fairy notices the closeness between the two guests and points out that Charline has been spending a lot of time with Liline lately. Charline explains that she has been keeping Liline company at school because the girl seemed worn out by noble society. Charline invites them to call her Shol, prompting Ariza to suddenly address her as Sensei, with a revelation. Charline insists on being called by her name instead of a title, and Fairy happily agrees to drop the formalities as well. Ariza reveals a set of illustrations to the group, showing a drawing of the character Charles that leaves them stunned. Fairy admires the unique style, and Ariza reveals that Lady Liline is the artist who drew the characters from her text. The image of Lord Dirk moves Fairy to tears as she realizes she might have been a fan of this work in her past life too. Ariza asks permission to show the art to her publisher, while Fairy reflects on how different her view of the world would be if she were in Liline's shoes. Fairy demands 10 copies of the Muse portrait, her collector's spirit igniting as she declares she needs them immediately. Muse stretches his shoulders and asks why she needs a drawing when the real thing is right there wanting to look at her. He agrees to the request but reminds her that the artist is the transfer student, making the situation slightly awkward. The New Year's festival arrives, and Fairy throws her hands up in a cheer of pure excitement. A classmate relieves them from their morning shift at the bazaar, thanking Fairy for her hard work. Fairy hands over historical reference materials to a grateful student before Muse suggests they look around. Navigating the bustling accessories stall, a student suggests wearing a coat to the upcoming concert. Spotting Charline and the Crown Prince at a nearby table, a classmate wonders if His Highness can actually escort her properly. Accompanied by her husband Muse, a pregnant Fairy confidently assures her friends that the prince practiced his etiquette extensively with Hugo. Fairy mentally pictures the bizarre visual of a bespectacled Hugo passionately teaching the Crown Prince how to pull a lady close. Strolling through the vibrant campus courtyard, the couples enjoy the festive atmosphere of the sunny academy grounds. Swept up in a sudden Princess Carrie, a flustered Fairy hides her face while onlookers coo at the enthusiastic couple. Carried effortlessly toward the stairs, Fairy nervously reminds Muse of her previous attempts to gently refuse such royal treatment. Muse calmly counters her worries about her pregnancy weight by casually offering to navigate the stairs entirely blindfolded. To her absolute astonishment, Muse flawlessly marches up and down the steps without relying on his vision at all. Smiling warmly, Muse assures his blushing wife that she is still incredibly light and that he truly loves holding her close. Flushed from their walk, Fairy happily asks to remove her gloves since their intertwined hands provide more than enough warmth. Taking her breath away like a scene from a romantic manga, Muse tenderly slips their joined hands straight into his warm coat pocket. Fairy's stomach lets out a loud growl as she rattles off a massive list of decadent festival foods like a magic incantation. Chuckling at her massive appetite, Muse kindly suggests they split the feast since she simply cannot choose just one dish. Sitting before a mountain of delicious pastries and pasta, Muse warmly insists that his pregnant wife take the very first bite. Panicking as Muse reaches for her half-eaten sandwich, Fairy desperately asks for a knife so she can cut it properly. Taking a bite directly from her leftovers, Muse calls the food a delicacy and leaves his wife utterly defenseless against his charm. Gazing out the large courtyard window, the isolated couple notices that the highly anticipated festival campfire has finally started. Watching the students silently meditate around the towering flames, they decide to skip the lackluster event and stay inside. Kneeling gracefully before her, Muse asks to inspect Fairy's tired legs while she frantically protests out of sheer embarrassment. Ignoring her flustered excuses, the devoted husband carefully examines her heavily swollen feet with profound and visible concern. Finishing a soothing leg massage, Muse helps slip her shoes back on while Fairy offers him a deeply sincere thank you. Overwhelmed by his constant affection, Fairy asks why he does so much for her, prompting Muse to confess that she taught him true joy. Holding her hands with a loving smile, Muse gently asks her to simply stay by his side forever without needing to understand why. Holding his pregnant wife close, Muse smiles warmly as Fairy happily declares that they will stay together forever. Watching the couples enjoy the peaceful festival campfire, the remaining students happily agree that honoring today's memories is a wonderful idea. Standing quietly in the falling snow, a subdued Liline watches the festive scene with a deeply melancholic expression. Reflecting on her past actions, Liline realizes that Fairy is genuinely a good person and notes how Charline constantly stays by her side. She ponders how everyone in this world behaves differently from the game's setting, even acknowledging a fan theory that this festival was never originally supposed to exist. Seeing how the world naturally adapts and thrives around her, a shaken Liline finally begins to wonder if she was the one who was wrong from the very start. The following day at House Lamist, Fairy warmly asks Charline how she enjoyed the highly successful festival. Sipping her tea, an exasperated Charline admits it was fun but complains that His Highness was far too shy and clumsy. She recounts how the prince clearly wanted to hold her hand, prompting her to boldly offer hers first. To her absolute bewilderment, the blushing prince bizarrely claimed his hands were indisposed instead of simply taking hers. She complains that he still reflexively greets other women but immediately bursts into tears and apologizes whenever he realizes what he did. Changing the subject, Fairy casually asks if Charline tried the special surprise sandwich during the event. Charline happily explains that the prince accidentally got the ultra-spicy dud, so she immediately swapped her regular sandwich with him. Fairy listens in awe as Charline describes the prince holding the normal sandwich up like a sacred treasure in sheer gratitude. Returning to her festival complaints, Charline sighs and admits she accidentally fell asleep right next to the prince during the campfire. Instead of pulling her close like a romantic lead, the hopeless prince merely propped her sleeping head up with a single trembling finger. Fairy stares in absolute disbelief at the unromantic gesture, playfully agreeing that His Highness is completely hopeless compared to standard romance novels. Smiling fondly at her friend's romantic woes, Fairy silently notes that the prince truly is a hopelessly awkward man. Growing serious, Charline gently informs Fairy that a recovering Liline has explicitly asked to speak with her. Assuring Fairy that Liline is much calmer after receiving medical help, Charline warmly asks her to consider the meeting after discussing it with Muse. Suddenly shifting gears, a panicked Charline reveals she saw Lord Hugo with a mystery woman and frantically wonders if he is in love. Stepping into the conversation, Muse calmly clarifies that the mystery woman is simply Hugo's sister, instantly resolving the dramatic misunderstanding. With the silly panic settled, an earnest Fairy agrees to wait and see about meeting Liline since Charline highly recommends it. 7 months into her pregnancy, the determined student takes her final exams in the infirmary, utilizing the special accommodations granted for her condition. A rhythmic knocking breaks her concentration, confirming Muse's predictions were spot on and triggering a distinct sense of déjà vu. Hoping to pass and enjoy her student life a little longer, she is interrupted by a concerned voice asking if she is holding up okay. She reflects with immense gratitude that she made it this far without expulsion, a fate that usually befalls pregnant students. Admitting he watched her for a second, the boy praises Fairy for her performance just as she feels a sudden, heavy thump in her womb. She gasps in shock as the sensation repeats, realizing with sudden clarity that the baby is moving vigorously. Panic instantly seizes the father-to-be, who shouts about the baby kicking and scrambles to fetch Mia immediately. As the adrenaline of the exam fades, Fairy collapses onto the table, utterly exhausted by the brutality of facing finals so soon after transferring. When an attendant rushes in to check on her, Fairy admits that while she isn't in pain, her stomach feels like it is churning. Mia calmly deduces that Fairy finally felt fetal movement, while simultaneously pivoting to ask Lady Liline Negan about a cover illustration matter. The attendant expresses genuine surprise that Fairy hadn't noticed until now, revealing that the baby has actually been moving constantly. While Fairy sits in disbelief, her partner teases her for being slow on the uptake, noting the baby is always energetic during checkups. As the father affectionately presses his ear to her belly to listen, Mia confirms there are no abnormalities or tightening sensations. Relieved that the pregnancy is stable, the group listens as Mia warns them to report any irregularities immediately due to the risk of premature birth at this stage. Although light exercise is usually recommended, the attendant hesitates significantly when addressing the specific restrictions required for Fairy's case. The boy crosses his arms, noting that he is far stricter about watching her health as they celebrate finishing finals without incident. Sometime later, a merchant arrives to thank Lord Lamist and Lady Fairy for their order, noting that Killian is currently visiting the estate. Rewinding to the afternoon of the last exam, the narrative reveals the group discussing the merchant's development of a new type of cotton fabric. Fairy is initially puzzled by the cloth merchant's presence until Muse reveals he specifically invited the man to present his wares. Overwhelmed by the sheer number of choices, Fairy listens as Muse insists it is time to prepare outfits for the baby now that they've felt it move. Examining the standard samples, Fairy worries that the current fabrics of this world are far too rough and stiff for a newborn's delicate skin. The merchant reveals a newly developed fabric which immediately catches Muse's discerning eye as a potential solution. Identifying the fiber as cotton, Fairy mentally compares its soft, breathable texture to the double gauze she remembers from her previous life. The merchant explains this unique weave utilizes an original method from House Hendrick's lands, revealing a past connection between his firm and Lord Killian's family. Muse sharply decides to purchase the fabric, impressing Fairy with his business acumen in securing an early distribution contract with Lord Hendrick. Explaining that standard cotton is too stiff, Muse thanks the inventor for coming in person to help draft immediate designs for the baby. The creator reveals he refined the spinning and weaving process to retain natural softness, crediting Lady Fairy's previous idea about cotton batting for the breakthrough. He admits that no mill can currently replicate the complex technique, limiting production to a tiny output within their own domain. To the merchant's absolute shock, Lord Lamist immediately offers to finance the construction of a dedicated factory to scale production. Ignoring the merchant's hesitation about the 10-year repayment plan, Muse insists they must control the entire supply chain from crop to final cotton product themselves. Muse frames the investment as a long-term strategy, demanding the merchant create innovative products while offering a generous 10-year timeline for profitability. The merchant stammers in disbelief at the decade-long grace period, clearly overwhelmed by the unexpected terms. Fairy quietly asks if this arrangement constitutes a bad deal, to which Muse succinctly assures her it does not. Overcome with gratitude, the merchant bows deeply and thanks them profusely for the incredible opportunity. Seizing the moment, Fairy hesitantly asks if they could possibly manufacture women's underwear using the new fabric. Muse's demeanor instantly shifts as he orders Fairy to step aside, shocked and flustered by the sudden mention of undergarments. Blushing furiously, Muse scolds her for discussing lingerie with another man, while Fairy innocently protests that she had no ill intentions. Muse insists he will handle the matter personally, while Fairy internally complains about the discomfort of current fabrics and Muse worries about other men imagining her in them. While Muse hides his embarrassment in the corner, Fairy realizes they can proceed with the underwear research despite the awkward atmosphere. She recalls that Muse ordered a mountain of clothes previously and worries about waste since babies outgrow outfits in seconds. Time fast-forwards to the 8th month of pregnancy after finals, where Muse receives a delivery of a new book titled, Fat Melts That Ice. He presents the very first copy to Fairy, who immediately notices the gorgeous cover illustration clearly depicts Muse himself. They confirm that Ariza's novel is modeled on them and that the cover artist is none other than Lady Liline. Muse explains that Lady Liline wishes to visit, as Lady Ariza requested to hand them the sample in person. Concerned about safety, Muse mentions he discussed the visit with Lady Charline because he must visit the castle with his father that day. Muse agreed to Charline's plan to put his mind at ease, suggesting they ask His Highness to lend them a few guards for security. When the day arrives, Muse praises Liline for her wonderful technique and is surprised to learn she did the coloring herself. Liline sits nervously across from Fairy in the reception room, the tension thick as the servants stand watch nearby. The maid exits the room, the door clicking shut to leave the two women alone in the quiet parlor. Once private, Liline bows her head and apologizes profusely to Lady Fairy for all her past behavior. She reveals the root of her delusion, confessing that she convinced herself she was the heroine of a game she loved in a past life. Liline explains that she is finally facing herself thanks to a doctor Lady Charline introduced her to. With tears in her eyes, she admits she finally understands she is not the heroine and that the people in this world have personalities distinct from the game. Fairy quietly accepts the apology as Liline expresses deep regret for treating her terribly based on those delusions. Noticing a Muse charm on Liline's bag, Fairy asks what the past life Liline was like, acknowledging her obsession. Liline confesses that realizing this wasn't the game made her feel like a villain, but Fairy laughs that this passion is why her cover art is so good. She describes a blending of her past and present selves, admitting to the doctor that her behavior likely stems from trauma. Reflecting on her childhood, she realizes her obsession was a coping mechanism for losing her family back-to-back when she was little. She acknowledges that Lady Charline is kind and that she wrongly treated her own parents, the Viscount couple, like mere helper NPCs. Liline finally understands that the people around her are real and were truly worried about her, not just fulfilling a setting. Fairy comforts her by affirming she has wonderful parents, and Liline resolves not to hurt them anymore now that she has made peace with herself. Liline asks Fairy how she feels now, specifically regarding Muse, and requests permission to be brutally honest about her experience. She admits she wasn't sure whose route she was on, so she approached everyone, only to find the experience scary and intense rather than romantic. Fairy is stunned to learn that absolutely none of the game events triggered after Liline transferred to the school. They realize that almost nothing in this reality matched the game, concluding that meeting Killian was perhaps the only coincidence. Curious about Liline's actual feelings, Fairy asks if there is anyone she is genuinely interested in right now. Blushing, Liline shyly reveals that the publisher's representative has actually caught her eye. Fairy imagines a dazzling, stereotypical love interest, while Liline describes him as handsome but gentle on the eyes. Reflecting on Lady Charline's criticism about her relying on others, Liline resolves to do things properly by herself this time. The maid interrupts to announce that Lady Ariza is waiting, shifting the conversation to the upcoming art book. Liline enthusiastically describes the specialty fields, art book containing profiles and settings, a book Fairy remembers buying in her past life. When Liline mentions that Mr. Harkins handled the design, Fairy suggests they ask him about it next time they meet. Liline holds up a Muse art book, noting that Mr. Harkins was the one who backed Fairy for the cover illustration. Fairy immediately demands a Muse art book for herself, begging Liline for a favor despite being married to the subject. Liline laughs that being a stan for one's own husband is wild, while Fairy insists that the 2D version is a separate entity. Agreeing to the request, Liline smiles cutely and offers to draw a simple sketch right then and there. Fairy squeals over the sketch of Muse-sama, causing Liline to dryly remark that she should direct that affection to the real person. Muse arrives home and greets his wife, causing a panicked Fairy to hide the drawing and scream, "Forget it." Fairy considers revealing that she is also a reincarnator but decides against it to spare Liline the sadness of seeing her favorite character married. Muse notices the drawing and demands Fairy look at the real thing, admitting he feels jealous of a mere sketch. He confesses to being narrow-minded, asking Fairy if she has a problem with his jealousy. Declaring that Fairy is too precious to share, Muse insists he wants her love all to himself, not directed at a drawing. He holds her tight and kisses her cheek, vowing never to let her go because he still feels anxious about losing her. Fairy touches his face gently, telling him to never let go of her either. Muse insists that wanting to hold the woman he loves is normal, pulling her closer despite her flustered reaction. He stops himself, declaring he is abstaining for the sake of their child, but warns Fairy to be prepared for the future. The students gather with relief and anticipation as graduation day finally arrives following Liline's eventful visit. Friendly faces warmly remind the couple not to stay out too late while celebrating their hard-earned graduation. A classmate stares in absolute disbelief at Fairy's outfit, astounded that her partner literally dressed her head to toe in his personal colors. Muse casually defends his bold fashion choices while an observant friend points out the highly unusual color of his own tailored jacket. Smiling proudly, Muse reveals that his shifting, iridescent jacket was specifically chosen to flawlessly match the color of Fairy's beautiful hair. With their dazzling outfits fully admired, the glowing couple happily sets off for the grand ceremony. Bidding their friends a warm farewell, they prepare to join the rest of the noble students gathered for the event. Students flood into the Academy's majestic Great Hall, ready to endure the formal speeches and faculty remarks. Spotting them in the crowd, a friend approaches while Muse immediately offers his pregnant wife a chance to rest before the banquet begins. A radiant Charline suddenly appears to offer her warm congratulations while explaining that everyone else is off enjoying the day with their partners. Charline sighs in utter exasperation as she explains that the prince completely vanished right after their initial greetings. A loud voice suddenly booms Charline's name across the hall just as the room's lights inexplicably plunge into absolute darkness. A brilliant, blinding spotlight pierces the sudden darkness, sweeping across the grand staircase to reveal a lone, dramatic figure. The prince stands nervously in the intense lighting, calling out to a completely bewildered and blushing Charline. Charline panics under the blinding illumination while a bystander casually notes that the prince literally invented the spotlight just for this highly specific moment. Looking deeply vulnerable, the prince awkwardly admits to showing her far too many of his pathetic and clumsy sides. Fairy watches the fumbling display with intense determination, mentally cheering for the hopelessly wimpy royal to finally pull it together. In a classic display of sheer clumsiness, the prince painfully bites his tongue right in the middle of his grand, dramatic proposal. Despite his botched and lisping delivery, Charline tearfully and gladly accepts his proposal before issuing a very firm condition. She fiercely warns the crying prince that she will seek an immediate divorce if he ever fails to truly cherish her. Staring him down, she coldly reminds him of his terrible habit of casually flirting with other women at the drop of a hat. With a confident and radiant smile, she demands that he finally prove his ultimate devotion through genuine actions instead of empty words. Overwhelmed by her acceptance, the prince suddenly tackles her in a desperate, deeply emotional embrace while screaming his love. Watching the dramatic spectacle unfold, Fairy and Muse smile warmly and agree that the chaotic couple truly suits each other perfectly. Elsewhere, a bespectacled Hugo is spotted effortlessly charming Duke Belmont's daughter, who apparently fell for him at first sight. Muse calmly explains that Hugo's new romance is actually a calculated political maneuver to infiltrate a faction that fiercely opposes the crown. Fairy realizes the sheer ambition behind the match, noting that the political marriage could eventually grant Hugo a powerful ducal title. Muse shudders playfully at Hugo's demonic efficiency, completely awed by how ruthlessly the future chancellor is already crushing the prince's political rivals. A soft, polite voice suddenly interrupts their deep political musings. They turn to see a young man approaching, who is immediately recognized by the group as the notorious Mr. Harkins. The flustered man insists nothing weird is going on, confirming Liline's exact description that he is exceptionally gentle on the eyes. Bowing deeply before Muse, Harkins offers a profound and highly sincere apology for his past actions regarding Fairy. Muse stares down the apologetic man with a cold, piercing gaze, firmly stating that Fairy's ultimate forgiveness is the only thing that matters. Accepting the apology, Fairy compliments Liline's lovely dress, suddenly realizing it flawlessly matches the exact design from the original game. Liline gleefully spins in her gorgeous gown, explaining that her parents happily gifted it to her instead of relying on a romance target. Fairy warmly praises the sweet design, completely delighted to see her friend shining so brightly on their incredibly special day. Smiling brightly at her husband, Fairy enthusiastically reveals her brand new goal to become an illustrator after graduation. A confused Muse questions the unfamiliar term while Fairy happily explains she wants to create stylized art like commissioned artists in her old world. Clasping her hands in sheer joy, the excited graduate declares her ultimate dream to draw book covers and spread comics throughout the kingdom. Switching into full nerd mode, Fairy passionately breaks down how comics link sequential panels and dialogue to create incredibly immersive stories. Blushing furiously as her inner otaku suddenly slips out, Fairy apologizes while a highly amused Muse eagerly asks to read her work when it is finished. Noting Liline's undeniable heroine aura, Fairy wonders if Muse would have fallen for the transfer student, prompting him to instantly shut down the ridiculous idea. A group of female classmates nervously interrupts the couple, asking if they can steal Fairy away for a brief moment. Realizing the girls are eager to discuss her published romance novel, an understanding Muse politely steps out of the room to give them space. The excited classmates completely surround Fairy, desperately demanding to know how she managed to successfully melt a man who can pin someone with a single look. Dropping massive truth bombs, the girls admit they always wanted to talk to Fairy but felt cutting between her and the intimidating Lord Lamist was utterly unforgivable. The classmates confess they previously avoided Fairy due to her severe resting face, making her suddenly realize exactly why the Ice Prince moniker stuck to Muse. Returning to the Ramana estate, a stunned Fairy is greeted by her fully assembled family warmly welcoming the graduates back home. Her parents happily explain they invited the entire family over since traveling is simply too difficult for the heavily pregnant Fairy right now. Her family fawns over her growing belly, with the younger siblings eagerly asking for permission to feel the baby's constant kicking. A panicking sibling suddenly confronts Fairy with a special edition of her novel, frantically demanding to know if the cheesy romance is actually based on her reality. The desperate sibling insists the real Muse would never do such cheesy things, begging Fairy to admit the embarrassing story is just a massive exaggeration. Sweating nervously, Fairy furiously fans herself in sheer embarrassment as the imposing Muse smoothly steps into the lively conversation. Flashing a dazzling smile, the infamous Ice Prince casually confirms the romantic story is completely accurate and tells the stunned siblings it is his absolute pleasure. Following the chaotic family reunion, Lord Chris and Lady Senna warmly congratulate Fairy and express their profound relief that she graduated safely. Entering her final due month, a heavily pregnant Fairy peacefully notes that her gestation aligns perfectly with the timeline of her past life. Relying on routine checkups and Dr. Mia's expert advice, the expectant couple enjoys peaceful garden walks while waiting to finally meet their baby. Staring quietly into the empty crib, a visibly tense Muse attempts to hide his sudden anxiety when Fairy gently asks what is wrong. Confessing his deep insecurities, Muse admits he doesn't want Fairy to think less of him while she firmly reassures her husband she never will. Muse quietly admits his fear that she will drift away once the baby arrives, prompting Fairy to tenderly promise she will always remain his endlessly devoted wife. Fairy looks completely bewildered by a strange sensation while Muse tenderly holds her hands and calls her his dearest. Clutching her swollen stomach with a sudden wince, she leans heavily against the crib and wonders if the foggy pain is actually the start of labor. Lying comfortably in bed, Fairy casually asks Dr. Mia if the mild, cramp-like pain she feels is truly all there is to giving birth. Hours later, Fairy's calm expression shatters into pure agony as Mia warns that the intense contractions will only ramp up from here. Turning to the anxious husband, Dr. Mia firmly instructs Muse to step outside while they prepare for the difficult delivery. Unfazed by Mia's warning that the brutal scene might make him faint, a fiercely determined Muse insists on staying right by his wife's side. Screaming out in sheer, agonizing pain, Fairy desperately crushes Muse's hands while begging to know how much longer she has to endure. Staring down with intense and unwavering devotion, Muse firmly declares that leaving her alone to fight this battle is simply not an option. Encouraged by his voice, a frantic Fairy suddenly recalls a special breathing technique from her past life and begins panting heavily through the blinding pain. Muse desperately cheers her on as she unleashes a final, agonizing scream, pushing past her physical limits as the crucial moment finally arrives. Tears streaming freely down her exhausted face, Fairy squeezes her eyes shut and pushes with an earth-shattering burst of pure willpower. The piercing cry of a newborn shatters the tense silence as Fairy completely relaxes, utterly stunned that the agonizing pain vanished in an instant. Holding up a loudly wailing, perfectly healthy baby boy, a smiling Dr. Mia warmly praises the exhausted mother for her incredible effort. Looking completely drained but overwhelmingly awestruck, Fairy gently cradles their precious little child safely against her chest. Staring down at the tiny bundle, she smiles softly while marveling at the unbelievable reality that this precious life was inside her all along. Lord Chris bursts into the room in a total panic as a deeply moved Muse covers his face, fighting back tears while praising his wife's incredible strength. A cheerful Dr. Mia gently reminds the monumental mother to rest up and report any afterpains, completely overjoyed by the highly successful delivery. Fairy excitedly shows Muse the adorable new outfits her friends sent for their growing baby boy. A loving Muse watches fondly as Fairy fawns over little Elian, completely enamored by the infant's cute face. Fairy continues to enthusiastically shower Rio with baby talk, leaving a slightly amused Muse staring at his doting wife. 2 peaceful months pass since the birth, bringing the end of Fairy's puerperium period with both mother and baby in perfect health. The couple officially names the boy Elian after the god of love, ensuring his life is forever brimming with radiant blessings. With their daily routine finally settling into a peaceful rhythm, Fairy suddenly asks Muse if she can have a camera. A confused Muse questions what a camera is, prompting Fairy to explain it is a special device used to record a child as they grow. A stunned Fairy marvels at an incredibly detailed sketchbook, completely amazed that Muse has been drawing Elian relentlessly since his birth. Frantically sketching with lightning speed, Muse insists that no matter how much he draws, it simply isn't enough to capture their rapidly growing son. Deeply moved by his obsessive but endearing dedication, a smiling Fairy warmly thanks her husband for his beautiful efforts. Muse's pen continues to scratch rapidly across the paper as he eagerly logs yet another fleeting memory of his beloved child. Fairy smiles thoughtfully while writing in her own baby journal, knowing she will fondly look back on these precious early moments one day. Lady Senna bursts into the room and instantly melts over the baby, declaring herself far too happy while offering to help Fairy with her milestones. Gently brushing the sleeping infant's cheek, Fairy softly notes to Senna how easily people forget the littlest details of life. A concerned Fairy recalls Muse's confession about feeling lonely before the birth, wondering aloud what his vulnerable words truly meant. Senna giggles warmly while hugging the baby close, playfully dismissing Fairy's worries and noting how much the child already takes after Chris. Gazing out the sunlit window, a gentle Senna kindly offers to have herself and Sonia take care of little Rio for the evening. A startled Fairy hesitates, But head-maid Sonia steps in with a warm smile and insists the couple go enjoy some much-needed slow time together. Fairy anxiously protests that the baby cries at night, completely unwilling to burden the hardworking staff with such an exhausting task. Reassuring the worried mother, Sonia clarifies they just want the exhausted couple to take a single night for themselves without any pressure to make another baby. Deeply touched by their incredibly thoughtful gesture, a blushing Fairy sincerely thanks Lady Senna and Sonia for their unwavering support. Lying in bed that night, Fairy stares quietly at the ceiling and realizes just how empty the large room feels without Elian sleeping nearby. She turns to her peacefully sleeping husband and rests a gentle hand on her stomach, silently recalling his lingering doubts about becoming a good father. Drifting off to sleep with a tender smile, Fairy cuddles close to Muse in the quiet, comforting warmth of their shared bed. 6 months later, a completely smitten Lord Chris bursts through the doors to dramatically shower his adorable grandson with excessive affection. Fairy recalls the heartfelt promise she and Muse made upon learning of her pregnancy to hold their official wedding ceremony after their child turned 1. A whole year with little Elian flies by in an absolute flash, bringing the highly anticipated day of the grand wedding. Dressed in a breathtaking gown, Fairy bids a fond farewell to her tearful parents as they excitedly promise her even greater happiness ahead. A heavy set of grand double doors slowly creaks open to reveal a radiant, smiling Fairy stepping into the stunning venue. A dashing Muse stands proudly at the altar, holding a massive bouquet of roses while securely cradling their precious son in his arms. The beautiful family of 3 walks happily down the aisle together as the joyous crowd erupts into thunderous applause. Standing before the ornate altar, the loving couple prepares to exchange their long-awaited vows under the watchful eyes of their gathered family. Staring passionately into Fairy's eyes, Muse firmly vows to sacrifice his life to love his beautiful wife for all of his remaining days. Sealing their eternal promise with a tender kiss, the newlyweds embrace while a sleepy Elian rests peacefully against his father's shoulder. Following the romantic ceremony, Charline and the Crown Prince eagerly approach to offer their warmest congratulations to the incredibly happy couple. Fairy thanks them for coming and cheerfully notes that Charline is next, prompting the flustered noblewoman to smile and hope for the best. Hugo looks utterly exasperated as his unimpressed fiancée coldly calls him foolish for his past antics. Smiling warmly, Lady Calitia admits his foolishness is actually part of his charm, leaving a blushing Hugo to rub his neck. A shocked Cecherina stares in awe as her brother Marion proudly introduces his beautiful fiancée to the group. The stunning fiancée gracefully congratulates Fairy on her wedding, leaving the younger girl marveling at her fairy-like beauty. Clasping her hands in pure excitement, Cecherina eagerly asks if it wouldn't be lovely for their own wedding to include their future child. A frantic Marion begs her not to go that far, but the stubborn princess firmly insists she will be a proper lady in just a few short years. Fairy and Muse sweat drop at the intense exchange, noting that Marion's hope for the age gap to end their engagement is likely doomed. Sir Killian and Lady Ariza happily approach the newlyweds, warmly thanking them for the invite before announcing they have special news. A blushing Ariza and beaming Killian proudly declare their engagement, leaving a thrilled Fairy gasping in absolute delight. Fairy fondly recalls consulting Killian about her book cover while working tirelessly with Liline to become a committed novelist after graduation. Killian proudly states he will inherit an earldom but refuses to bind Ariza as a countess, prompting teasing remarks about a sweet office romance. Staring with pure devotion, Killian sincerely confesses he loves watching Ariza chase her dreams and simply wants to stay by her side forever. A familiar voice suddenly calls out to Lady Fairy, interrupting the heartwarming moment as everyone turns to look. A radiant Liline excitedly announces she finally got promoted to girlfriend, prompting a delighted Fairy to shower her with congratulations. Watching Liline beam with joy, Muse thoughtfully notes she looks much happier now that her career has taken off. A blushing Liline indignantly demands to know if they are calling her a child while a teasing Muse praises her newly matured charm. Fairy scans the lively crowd and realizes their entire circle of friends is present, except for the notoriously busy Sir Hugo. Muse casually explains that Hugo is busy handling state duties so the prince could attend, adding that he is also preparing to wed Lady Calitia. Smiling brightly, Fairy mentions they will host a girls' day later since Olive and Susanna couldn't attend due to unexpected pregnancy and fiancé drama. Later that peaceful night, Fairy sincerely thanks her husband for the wonderful day while Muse casually reveals he has something special for her. Opening a velvet box, Muse reveals a stunning, custom-made wedding ring that leaves a bewildered Fairy completely speechless. Fairy is taken aback by the romantic gesture, recalling that their kingdom typically marks marriages only with formal signatures rather than exchanging tokens. Holding the gleaming ring, a gentle Muse smiles warmly and softly asks for his beloved wife's hand. Kneeling gracefully beside their baby's crib, Muse formally takes Fairy's hand in his own for the intimate vow. Sliding the delicate band onto her finger, he passionately vows his eternal and unwavering love to her. Overwhelmed by pure joy, Fairy throws her arms around his neck and fiercely promises to devote her eternal love to him in return. Months later at the royal autumn wedding, an anxious Fairy watches from the pews and nervously wonders if the notoriously clumsy prince will be okay. Smiling softly, Fairy reassures herself that the crown prince will definitely manage as long as he is doing it for his beloved Charline. The grand cathedral doors swing open as the royal couple walks down the aisle to the majestic, sweeping sound of the organ. The bespectacled priest clears his throat to prompt the vow kiss, leaving the royal couple slightly flustered under the eager gaze of the crowd. Leaning in gently, the crown prince and Charline share a beautifully tender kiss as delicate flower petals rain down around them. The newlyweds wave happily to the cheering crowds from an ornate carriage, their grand and joyous marriage completely electrifying the nation. Half a year later, a frantic prince bursts through the doors screaming Charline's name in sheer, uncontainable excitement. He happily embraces his laughing wife, absolutely thrilled beyond words to learn that she has finally conceived their first child. The entire country erupts in joyous celebration once again as the royal family prepares to welcome its newest member. Time flows peacefully as a pregnant Fairy sits warmly with Muse and 3-year-old Elian, eagerly waiting to meet their second child. Little Elian pouts and cries out that his daddy is being unfair while Muse intimately strokes Fairy's chin. The adorable boy enthusiastically demands a kiss from his mother too, leaving an amused Muse quietly wondering who his son is actually more jealous of. Muse casually reveals he already suspected Fairy possessed memories of a past life, noting that her unique way of speaking gave her secret away long ago. Fairy shyly admits she liked Muse even in her previous world, prompting her deeply curious husband to ask about her past affections. Flashing a dazzling and affectionate smile, Muse tenderly declares that she was born into this new world simply so they could finally meet. Clasping her hands with a radiant smile, Fairy silently vows that everything will be perfectly fine as long as she continues stacking happiness by Muse's side. Around the exact same time, a quiet but monumental discovery begins to unfold back at the towering Academy Library. A curious Liline pulls a familiar-looking book from the library shelves, noting it was penned by an Academy alum. She stares at the pages in absolute shock, suddenly recognizing a specific plot she had heard about years ago but never actually read. The book's cover clearly displays a romantic illustration of Muse under the title, "What Melts That Ice Is?", confirming it is directly related to the Trilovia universe. Liline trembles in pure disbelief as she reads the familiar setting, frantically wondering why first-generation game characters are suddenly appearing in her reality. Sweating nervously with wide, terrified eyes, a deeply shaken Liline finally realizes she is not the only person operating with past life knowledge. Staring down at an illustrated page filled with detailed character profiles of her classmates, she desperately questions if there are other hidden reincarnators manipulating the world. At the estate entrance, a stern maid confronts the visiting Marchioness Catherine, coldly asking the unwelcome guest to please leave immediately. Catherine attempts to leverage her status to see Lord Ashley, but the maid stands her ground, stating the young lord is out and she has nothing to discuss with her. With a heavy sigh of disdain, Catherine sneers at the prospect of a talentless, witless girl becoming her daughter-in-law, calling it a depressing future. Spotting Carla nearby, Catherine delivers a final parting insult, mockingly bidding farewell to Miss Cooler before sweeping past her. Inside the carriage, the maid anxiously asks if a city doctor is truly acceptable, urging Lady Carla to prioritize her health above all else. Carla insists she is fine with the arrangement, brushing off the suggestion to see her cousin Melissa, the family physician. They arrive at a modest city clinic, where the sounds of the common folk fill the air as a patient on crutches hobbles by. The examination concludes with a shocking revelation as the doctor bluntly informs a pale Lady Carla that she is pregnant. Nausea overwhelms Carla as the reality sinks in, her mind flashing back to a fleeting memory of a cool man amidst the sudden sickness. A strange vision pierces her consciousness, revealing a game title screen, True Lover 2, and causing her to question if this is a dream. She sees bizarre images of a handheld console and error messages, confusing memories of crashing during CG scenes with her current reality. Carla snaps awake in the clinic to find a worried Melissa hovering over her mind reeling with the nonsensical thought that she might be a bug. The doctor brings her back to Earth with gentle but probing questions, confirming her status as a noble student and asking how this happened. When asked if she is engaged and will discuss the future with the father, Carla stammers a hesitant yes, while averting her gaze. Internally, she screams that it is impossible, convinced that his lordship would never accept this and would only view her as a burden. The doctor grimly explains the medical risks, warning that terminating the pregnancy now could affect her ability to conceive later. With solemn gravity, the physician advises Carla to consider her choice carefully, noting that the decision will weigh heavily on her heart. Leaving the clinic, Melissa questions Carla's conviction that the father hates her, urging her to speak with Lord Ashley at least once. Carla gazes out the carriage window, explaining that while both are marquisates, his family wields far greater influence and power. She resigns herself to the fact that nobles don't marry for love, recalling how Ashley has always been curt, cold, and scowling in her presence. Her mind drifts back to the incident 3 months ago, where a host's mistake at a country soiree assigned them the same room after she had too much wine. In the dim light of that memory, Ashley tries to stop her, but a desperate Carla begs him to give her just one unforgettable night. She refused to back down despite his resistance, her resolve unwavering until he finally relented to her pleas. Lying in his arms, she felt content even if it was just pity, assuring him she wouldn't regret it as they crossed the line. The next morning, Ashley asked with concern if she was all right, and Carla lied through her blush that she was perfectly fine. 3 months have vanished since that night, and Carla tells herself she doesn't regret the encounter. Melissa insists she has seen love in Ashley's actions since enrollment, but Carla bitterly retorts that she now knows it wasn't love at all. Carla fears that if she reveals the pregnancy, Ashley's kindness will force him to take responsibility out of duty rather than desire. Melissa gently asks if the life inside her exists because of love, but Carla remains determined not to trap him into a loveless marriage. Arriving back at the Bryant residence, Carla reflects on the strange game vision, concluding with a heavy heart that men can indeed sleep with women without love. Carla stares at the game title screen in her mind, realizing these ridiculous memories are from her past life. She recalls the sequel's setting and that the story begins tomorrow with the heroine's transfer. Analyzing the mechanics, she remembers that mid-game choices dictate the route in this sequel. Ashley strangely delayed his enrollment to match Carla, the designated villainess of the story. Carla fits the character profile perfectly as the book-loving, proper noble lady. The sequel emphasizes the tragedy of the villainess watching her fiancé's heart get stolen up close. In the game, Carla spirals until she finally snaps and gets expelled. The only deviation from the script in this reality is the secret life growing inside her. Her father Jamal interrupts her thoughts to ask if she is unwell, and she lies that she just needs rest. He gently reminds her not to push herself, citing the loss of her mother and sister. Carla leaves the room, crushed by the guilt of dragging their family name through the mud. Apologizing to her unborn child, she resolves that she cannot get rid of it despite her fecklessness. Nausea hits her the next morning, but she forces herself to witness the game's opening scene. Ashley condescendingly asks the lost girl if she doesn't even know where her homeroom is. He introduces himself to Sharia, the heroine of True Lover 2. Recrea steps in with a smile, telling Ashley to be gentle with the girl. Yormf and Mildra immediately crowd Sharia to introduce themselves. Sharia asks if her class wasn't listed while Ashley scolds Yormf for scaring her. Agiloa cuts in sharply, warning Yormf to watch his tone with the new student. The cast assembles to offer Sharia a campus tour or a trip to the cafe. Sharia beams as she faces the first major affection-affecting choice of the game. She selects Ashley, asking him to escort her to the staff room with a trusting smile. As they walk away, Sharia glances back and notices Carla watching them. Carla averts her gaze, painfully aware that the heroine is destined to fall for someone. She realizes with sudden clarity that the original Carla must have lived with this agony the entire time. Reflecting on the rigidity of noble betrothals, she wonders why they never seem to break until it's too late. Carla heads to class, telling herself that reality is far more complex than the game. The teacher calls for silence as Sharia Makoni introduces herself to the class. Carla notes that Sharia's greeting is a beat-for-beat reproduction of the game script. The teacher assigns Sharia the seat next to Yormf, deviating from the game's random seating. Sharia politely greets her neighbor while Carla wonders what is running through Ashley's mind. Carla accidentally locks eyes with Ashley and is immediately overcome by a wave of sickness. Ashley notices Carla's distress and asks if something is wrong, observing her pale complexion with deep concern. Carla excuses herself to the library for lunch, needing a quiet sanctuary away from the overwhelming smell of the cafeteria. Seeking calm among the shelves, she spots a familiar book and decides to distract herself with some light reading. She freezes in shock upon realizing the book was written by an alumnus, a detail she had heard years ago but ignored until now. Staring at the cover illustration of Muse, she gasps as she recognizes the character model from True Lover 2. Carla realizes she only knows the sequel and frantically wonders if the Villainess's pregnancy was a plot point in the first game. She approaches the librarian, Professor Andrew, and urgently requests to see the graduate register to verify her suspicions. Flipping through the yearbook, she demands to know who drew the portraits, her heart racing as she hunts for the artist's identity. The professor identifies the artist as Miss Leland Negan, noting she also illustrated Lady Ariza's famous novels. Carla marvels at the art style, realizing that in a world of traditional paintings, this anime style stands out as alien and unique. The professor reveals that the character models were Lord and Lady Lamist, who were students enrolled that very same year. Carla deduces that if Crown Prince Heldrias exists, then Recrias and Cecilina from the first game must be real people too. She asks the professor if the legendary closeness between Lord Lamist and Lady Fairy depicted in the book was historically accurate. Gazing at the romantic illustration, Carla whispers a hopeful wish that she might find a love like theirs someday. Reality crashes back in as she admits to herself that she and Ashley are nowhere near that level of intimacy. The professor confirms the couple got along from the start, causing Carla to compare their immediate bond to her own distant engagement. He chuckles that Lady Fairy was often clueless, though Carla wonders if that oblivious nature was part of her charm. The professor recounts how Lord Lamist threatened to drop out if the academy expelled the pregnant fairy, displaying incredible devotion. Carla is awestruck by the boldness of a duke's son risking the academy's reputation to protect his wife and unborn child. When asked about Leland, the professor mentions she didn't marry but instead pursued a career at a publishing house. The bell interrupts their conversation, and Carla excuses herself, her mind racing with the news of Leland's engagement and career. Stepping out of the library, she is startled to find Ashley waiting for her, his expression unreadable but concerned. He notes that she still looks pale and asks what she was doing, his persistence catching her completely off guard. Carla fears that his kindness will make her fall for him, knowing she will eventually be consumed by jealousy over the heroine. Breaking the silence, Ashley asks if she knows the illustrator Leland Negan, surprising Carla with the specific inquiry. He explains that House Dwardell invested in publishing, which is how he came to know of the artist behind Zarian Tubin's cover. Ashley admits he is intrigued by her unique art style and wonders about the background that fostered such a distinct sense. He shares that Leland was an orphan adopted by the Negans, and her connection to the academy elite began when she transferred. He reflects on that golden era when the Crown Prince, Lady Charline, and Lord Lamist all attended the school together. While Ashley recalls his sister scolding him to broaden his horizons, Carla realizes Leland's name was also in the graduate register. She hypothesizes that if another reincarnator exists from the first game, it would likely be the heroine or the villainess. Dismissing the high-ranking nobles as inaccessible suspects, Carla decides the only person she can reach is Leland and resolves to visit her workplace. A servant informs Carla that Lady Leland is unfortunately away on a journey, leaving Carla stunned by the unexpected news. The maid clarifies that Leland is on extended leave and won't return for half a year, dealing a massive blow to Carla's plans. Despairing that her other options are royalty or high nobility, Carla feels her hopes slipping away until her maid offers encouragement. The maid declares her unwavering belief in Carla's past life story, having overcome her initial skepticism to offer full support. Moved to tears by such loyalty, Carla listens as her maid vows to remain on her side no matter what happens. As their carriage passes the Lamist estate, Carla frantically wonders if they might be able to meet the young lady of the house right then and there. Spotting a figure through the window, Carla gasps in recognition, realizing Lady Lamist is just within reach. Recognizing a maid at the gate from their academy training days, Carla's maid offers to approach her friend, but Carla hesitates. Refusing to let her servant take the fall, Carla orders the carriage to stop and rushes out, shouting that she will take full responsibility. Carla sprints towards the entrance with unladylike speed, causing a commotion at the gate that disrupts the estate's peace. Time seems to freeze as Carla locks eyes with the woman she sought, disbelief washing over her as their gazes meet. To Carla's amazement, the elegant and warm Lady Fairy grants them an immediate audience, inviting them inside. Seated in the parlor, Carla formally introduces herself as the second daughter of Marquis Bryett, bowing her head in respect. She apologizes profusely for the intrusion and lack of gifts, but Fairy graciously waves off the concern while serving tea. Fairy explains that the tea is a special blend safe for expectant mothers, sent by her thoughtful father-in-law. Requesting privacy, Fairy asks the maids to leave the room so she can speak with Carla alone about her counseling. The moment the door clicks shut, Fairy drops the pleasantries and sharply asks if Carla possesses memories of a previous life. Fairy furiously denies using cheats to win Muse's heart, insisting it was pure love before asking if Carla is a reincarnator too. Admitting she suspected a connection after reading the novel, Fairy listens as Carla asks about breaking the game's scenarios. Fairy confesses she honestly doesn't know how game characters exist here or what the true nature of this world really is. She explains that while a scenario mold exists, the characters have their own wills, meaning the future is not set in stone. Fairy drops the bombshell that a sequel called Trulovier 2 exists, leaving Carla reeling from the revelation that she missed an entire game. Describing the sequel's plot, Fairy explains that the story begins with the heroine's transfer at the start of the final year. Fairy reveals she was also a villainess who recovered her memories early, realizing she shares the exact same starting position as Carla. With a gentle smile, Fairy discloses that she had already deviated from the plot by becoming pregnant with Muse's child before the game began. Realizing the parallel, Fairy correctly deduces that Carla is also pregnant and asks if she finds herself in the same predicament. Carla confesses the child belongs to her fiancé but insists he has disliked her for years, making the situation hopeless. Fairy gently counters that she senses kindness and sincerity in Ashley's core, doubting Carla's conviction that he hates her. Overwhelmed by the contrast in their fortunes, Carla breaks down and admits she is terribly jealous of Fairy's happiness. Fairy moves to comfort the sobbing girl, listening as Carla sobs that she only wants to avoid stealing her fiancé's future joy. Carla voices her deepest fear that Ashley will ask to end the engagement, convinced that his dislike for her would make the child nothing but a burden. When Fairy asks if anyone else is aware of her condition, Carla admits that only the doctor who examined her knows the truth. Fairy sternly reprimands Carla for considering running away from home, warning her that such a rash decision isn't as easy as she thinks. Emphasizing their bond as fellow reincarnators, Fairy insists Carla must lean on her rather than recklessly trying to raise a baby alone. Carla attempts to decline the help to avoid being a nuisance, but Fairy presses for details on her pregnancy while sharing her own past determination. Fairy instructs Carla to wait and returns with a stack of loose clothes, accurately guessing she is around 3 months along. Presenting her old altered uniforms, Fairy smiles radiantly, causing Carla to internally admire her as a born heroine type. Little Elian toddles into the room, looking for the guest who was just there, effectively ending the serious conversation. Fairy scoops up her son while Muse watches the heartwarming scene, teasing his wife about her excessive baby talk. Muse asks if Lady Bryett was the visitor, and Fairy confirms the situation while preparing to explain the complex, game world context. Understanding the gravity of the secret, Muse agrees to keep the matter strictly between them as Fairy connects the dots. Fairy gently asks Elian to wait with the maid Sonia, needing a private moment to discuss the urgent matter with Muse. She explains to her husband that Carla's predicament is painfully similar to the desperate situation they faced back then. Muse muses on the irony of Carla disliking her fiancé, remarking that if a god exists, they certainly have a cruel sense of humor. A few days later, the narrative shifts to the school grounds where the heroine Sharia stands looking bewildered. Carla tries to eat her lunch in peace, only to be interrupted when Ashley unexpectedly appears with his own tray. Ashley asks permission to sit, explaining that he searched for her after noticing her absence at the cafeteria. He comments on her poor health and the quiet atmosphere, showing a level of concern that unsettles Carla. The moment is shattered when Sharia comes barreling around the corner and crashes directly into Ashley. Carla watches in confusion, realizing this event triggers incorrectly and that Sharia was supposed to bump into her, not Ashley. Sharia attempts to trigger a flag by asking about dogs, but the dog Noir ignores her completely to greet Carla. Feigning a phobia of caterpillars, Sharia screams and drops her handkerchief in a desperate bid for attention. To everyone's shock, Ashley simply swats the threat away without a shred of romantic tension, leaving Sharia dumbfounded. Ashley coldly questions Sharia's presence and her fear of dogs, delivering lines that completely deviate from the game's script. Carla observes the scene, noting that the real Ashley overcame his fear of dogs long ago and is perfectly fine with Noir. She realizes with a jolt that the plot is diverging exactly as Fairy predicted, noting that elements are appearing where they shouldn't be. Watching the heroine's clumsy attempt to force the scenario, Carla begins to doubt if Sharia is actually a reincarnator at all. Sharia pants heavily while professing her love for the janitor's dog, apologizing for the commotion she caused at the estate. Watching from the shadows, Carla admits a pang of jealousy seeing the heroine's effortless charm and energy. The janitor reveals that a student has been secretly undoing the dog's chain lately, expressing concern about the rule-breaking behavior. Ashley overhears the conversation and decides he must warn the transfer student if she is the one recklessly releasing the animal. His internal monologue is cut short when he notices Carla standing nearby, his attention shifting instantly to his fiancée. Intervening in the discussion, Ashley suggests it is premature to suspect Sharia, proposing the chain incident might just be a coincidence. The conversation is interrupted by Lady Clarice, who approaches Carla with a serious expression to ask for a private moment. Clarice observes that Carla has looked unwell since the start of the term, asking if she needs any assistance. She offers her support if anything is wrong, urging Carla to take care of herself before politely taking her leave. A baffled Ashley asks if Carla was close friends with Lady Barriate, to which Carla confusedly replies that she barely knows her. Staring intensely at Carla, Ashley bluntly confirms that she looks quite unwell, admitting he has been watching her face closely. He requests to accompany her home in her carriage, stating he has a personal matter to discuss with Marquis Bryant immediately. An awkward silence fills the carriage until Carla breaks the tension, asking what business he could possibly have with her father. Ashley looks visibly stressed but refuses to answer, causing Carla to mentally lament how close yet distant they are. The carriage suddenly lurches as the driver swerves to avoid a cat, throwing the passengers off balance in a moment of panic. Ashley steadies her and snaps at the driver to be careful, emphasizing that they are carrying an important guest. Carla instinctively touches her belly, interpreting his words to mean the baby is the only guest he cares about protecting. Arriving at the Bryant estate, Carla hesitates outside her father's door, recalling his order to change and report to him at once. She enters with a heavy heart, convinced Ashley is inside breaking their engagement because he dislikes her so much. Carla dreads the thought of watching the game's scenario unfold, terrified of seeing Ashley fall for the heroine right before her eyes. Realizing she cannot bear the pain or the scandal, she decides she must find a way to run away while carrying the child. She resolves to leave the nobility behind and live as a commoner, knowing an unwed mother would never be accepted in their circle. Panic rises as she tallies her lack of life skills, wondering how to rent a home or survive once her current assets run dry. Her father enters and asks for a moment to clarify the situation, catching Carla while she is absorbed in writing her escape plan. While furiously scribbling her strategy, Carla gives a distracted, monotone yes when her father asks if Ashley's report is true. Her father turns pale with shock at her immediate confirmation, trembling as he processes the gravity of the news. He stumbles out of the room in a daze, leaving Carla completely unaware that she just confirmed something major because she wasn't listening. Believing the talk was about her deteriorating relationship, Carla apologizes mentally to her father and steels herself to live independently. Melissa asks if the dress is too tight while helping Lady Carla change into a commoner's disguise for their outing. Relieved that the clothes fit well, Melissa insists Carla take a jacket to ease her own anxiety about her mistress catching a chill. Walking through the bustling town, Carla feels overwhelmed by her ignorance of common life while Melissa guides her through the streets. Carla points out ropes strung between buildings in confusion, prompting Melissa to explain they are simply for hanging laundry. Spotting a rent sign on an empty house, Carla excitedly points it out, impressing Melissa with her ability to read the common script. Melissa suggests they inquire with the landlord immediately since the property seems like a plausible option for Carla's needs. Carla pauses with a thoughtful expression, seemingly realizing that finding a sanctuary might not be as simple as spotting a sign. Days later, Fairy greets Carla at the estate and gently asks about the outcome of her recent house hunting attempt. Melissa explains the place was a disaster, revealing the house, was merely a storage room with no kitchen or bathroom facilities. Fairy grimly notes that young women are easy targets for such scams and asks Carla if she truly must move out. Carla reveals she overheard her father and Ashley discussing the dissolution of her engagement a few days prior. When Fairy asks if Ashley and the heroine are already close, Carla admits they aren't, though she senses an odd atmosphere between them. She recalls the conversation between Ashley and her father felt wrong, but her fear prevented her from investigating the matter further. Terrified of facing explicit rejection, Carla confesses she is too scared to ask Ashley directly about his true intentions. Despite her overwhelming fear, she resolves to hold herself together and endure anything to protect the life growing inside her. Fairy immediately offers to have Carla stay at her estate, declaring she will ask Muse to arrange the accommodations. Carla tries to protest, but Fairy silences her with a smile, refusing to let a pregnant woman live recklessly on the streets. Fairy holds Carla's hands warmly, promising to be there whenever needed and checking on her physical condition. Curious about the past, Carla asks Fairy what the original game's heroine was like during her student days. Fairy laughs awkwardly as she recounts how Liline was intensely aggressive and claimed Muse immediately, much to her own embarrassment. She contrasts that passion with Sharia, noting the current heroine feels unsettlingly robotic and passive. Fairy observes that Sharia seems to be checking off event flags perfectly rather than actually building relationships with anyone. They speculate that Sharia might be another reincarnator who is treating this world strictly as a game to be beaten. 1 month later, the school buzzes with tension as Sharia stares down at her textbook which has been savagely torn apart. Carla watches in confusion, wondering why someone would trigger a bullying event before the route has even branched. The male students gather around the desk, expressing disgust at the low-level harassment directed at the transfer student. Ashley stares coldly at the damaged book, warning that whoever committed this act better be prepared to face the consequences.